Democratic Party and by some in the media of President Biden's cognitive and physical decline while in office last year. Do these new allegations have you outraged, or is your focus on Trump and, quote, looking forward, as Democrats like to say?
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then it's Live Music Friday, courtesy of indie rock mainstays Carbon Leaf. Over 30 years into their career, the Virginia-based band just released their 15th studio album called Time is the Playground. They play tonight at the Spire Center in Plymouth, but they join us first to talk music and play a couple of songs. It's all ahead in the first hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. It's been a destructive week in Gaza. The Gaza Health Ministry says Israeli airstrikes have killed at least 300 Palestinians in the past 3 days. Israel says it's pressuring Hamas to release hostages. This comes as President Trump wraps up his trip to the Mideast today. NPR's Hadil Al-Shelchi has more.
Israel's military has dramatically intensified its campaign in Gaza, with President Trump still in the region. That's the sound of a few of the strikes overnight in the north of Gaza. Israeli officials say the intense bombing is their final warning to Hamas: surrender or they will launch an expanded offensive in Gaza. In preparation for it, dubbed Gideon's Chariot, Israel has been calling up tens of thousands of reservists. The plan involves displacing a large number of Palestinians to the south. There were hopes President Trump would advance talks towards a ceasefire during his trip to the Middle East, but there has been no public announcement about the talks. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Direct talks between Ukrainian and Russian delegations have concluded in Turkey. They only lasted a couple of hours. Russian President Vladimir Putin had called for the talks last weekend. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky went to Turkey yesterday, saying he was ready to meet Putin himself. But Putin didn't go. He sent a low-level delegation instead. President Trump had hinted he might go to the talks, but he did not. Trump said today nothing will happen to end Russia's war in Ukraine until he and Putin personally meet. A closely watched barometer of the U.S. economy has dropped. The University of Michigan's consumer sentiment gauge fell this month for the fifth month in a row. Since January, it's fallen by nearly a third. Americans are taking a dim view of the U.S. economy following the imposition of President Trump's global tariffs. Snow totals in the mountain ranges supplying water to the Colorado River are far lower than normal for this time of year, but this may not be receiving as much attention as usual. From member station KUNC, Alex Hager reports there's disarray in federal offices that manage water for 40 million people across the West.
Look at maps of snow totals across the Rockies right now, and you'll see a whole lot of red. Eric Balkin is with the nonprofit Glen Canyon Institute.
I think some of that chaos within the agencies, the broader negotiations happening on the Colorado River, all of these other factors, I think, are sort of drowning out the severity of the drought situation right now.
Low snow totals now could spell catastrophe for Lake Powell as soon as next year. The nation's second largest reservoir could lose the ability to generate hydropower or even send water downstream to the millions of people who depend on it. For NPR News, I'm Alex Hager in Fort Collins, Colorado.
Engineers who drive New Jersey Transit's commuter trains are on strike over wages. Hundreds of thousands of commuters are without transportation. New Jersey officials say they're seeking a fair contract agreement. It's NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Trump administration looking into whether Harvard is still factoring in race when it comes to student admissions. From our higher ed desk, GBH's Kirk Carapezza reports the federal investigation comes nearly 2 years after the U.S. Supreme Court decided that the consideration of race in admissions is unconstitutional.
The Department of Justice announced the investigation in a letter Thursday. It wants to know whether Harvard is abiding by the Supreme Court ruling or ignoring it. A Harvard spokesperson says the school is committed to following the law and argues the investigation is, quote, yet another abusive and retaliatory action. The university has been at odds with the Trump administration on a number of issues, with the administration freezing billions in federal funding in response. Kirk Carapezza, GBH News.
Luxury hospitality packages for the 2026 FIFA World Cup are now on sale. Packages for access to some of the 7 matches in Massachusetts start at $5,300 and go as high as $26,700. Boston Business Journal reports that 7 games of the tournament are being played at Gillette Stadium in Foxborough. However, Gillette will be called Boston Stadium for the duration of the tournament. As a matter of fact, all venues in the tournament will lose their naming rights sponsors for the tournament. Individual general sale tickets are expected to go on sale later this year. Tonight's Celtics-Knicks game in New York, a gangrene win sends the series to a 7th game in Boston on Monday. A gangrene loss ends the season. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the Wallace Foundation, an independent, nonpartisan research foundation collaborating with grantees and partners in the arts, school leadership, and youth development. More at wallacefoundation.org. This is NPR.
Houston Brady, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com. Thank
Marjorie's
you.
applauding for herself.
I always do.
Always does. Thank you.
I apologize. I have a cold. My voice doesn't sound so great. We're going to be joined by the Attorney General here on May 21st. She'll be with us from 1 to 2. Andrea Campbell taking our questions and yours. And Mayor Michelle Wu will be here on the 28th. That will be noon to 1. And welcome to GBH Champion Circle donors in the audience today. We very much appreciate your coming down. We hope you have a good time. We appreciate all your support of WGBH, especially now with the president breathing down our neck. Hello, Jim.
Hey there. I want to say, since we're probably going to make you miserable like we always do for the first 30 minutes, we have fabulous music following up. Carbon Leaf is going to play in about 30 minutes. They were rehearsing this morning. They sound spectacular as always. So either come on down if you're not here or make sure you're streaming at about 11:30. So we all remember where we were on June 27th, 2024, tuning in to CNN's first presidential debate of that year with an historic former president sharing the stage with the incumbent. Trump delivered his usual rapid-fire, make-believe, and set of lies. Biden delivered a performance that in all likelihood ended his decades-long political career and very possibly the possibility of the Democrats winning the presidential election. Here's just a piece.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Can I tell you, it's even painful to listen to it a year later. A new book out this week, co-authored by CNN's Jake Tapper, who we expect to join us in a couple of weeks, and Axios' Alex Thompson, contends the Democrats surrounding Biden went to great lengths to conceal his very real cognitive and physical decline from the American people, fueling a quixotic second run at the office, costing Democrats a chance to keep a felonious Donald Trump from returning to the White House. Yesterday, we spoke with the former host of Meet the Press, Chuck Todd, and Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley about this book and what it puts forward. Now it's your turn at 877-301-8970 to call or text. How does this story change how you view the Democratic Party and its leaders? Do you still trust Democrats to make the best decisions for the country? And do you trust them to be honest? Or is your response, you don't give a damn about what Joe Biden hid or covered up because Trump is such an existential threat to this country, we shouldn't even be talking about the past. And as a lot of Democrats say, we should be, quote, looking forward. The number is 877-301-8970 is the number. So what's your take on this, Marjorie?
Well, my take is that Jake Tapper is a really good reporter. He's got a lot of anonymous sources in here, but it's pretty damning. It's pretty damning that the people closest to Joe Biden, his wife, his family, and the aides around him knew. They talk about in this book that back in 2015, when he lost his son, Beau, was when they began to see a decline. 2015. So that's, before his first term, never mind his second term. And they talk about mistakes that Joe Biden made. I mean, lots of people make mistakes as they get older, but these were consistent mistakes where Jake Sullivan was a very close aide to him. He was calling him Steve, and Kate Bedingfield, who was his press person. He couldn't remember her name, and he would call her Press. They talk about the president President Biden doing videos on Zoom with constituents, and it was clear that he couldn't follow what was going on. At one point they talk about this is going to be had he won, kind of a Weekend with Bernie scenario, and that's the movie about the guy who had passed away, and they propped him up to have people think he was still alive. I mean, this was apparently their plan, that he would win, and then they would, people behind the scenes would be running the United States.
Okay, so I don't think anybody who is honest can defend what was done, this cover-up, this hiding. However, the critical question, I think, for a lot of people is whether or not we should even be talking about it. Because what we're going to hear, I think, today, and I'm sure the text will say this too, is there's no equivalency between a guy who is found civilly liable for rape, who is destroying the Constitution, hell-bent on destroying our democracy, and the cover-up, if I can call it that, of Joe Biden. I don't buy that at all. I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Biden did a lot of great things, and I'm sure people will call and say that as well. They should. But this kind of behavior and this kind of cover-up is just unconscionably horrible. And he can be guilty of misbehavior, maybe not of the same magnitude, maybe it is, at the same time that we condemn Trump for his lawlessness, his unconstitutionality, and all this stuff. So I think when a Democrat says, let's just look forward. You know, it's a good example. We had Ayanna Pressley on yesterday.
Yes.
When you first asked her about this, her position, I think it's fair to say, she was into the let's look forward thing. And then one of us asked her a follow-up and said, well, how can you even trust the Democrats, to be honest with you? And to her credit, I have to say, because a lot of polls never reverse a position in an authentic way in the same conversation. Here's a little bit what she had to say after we broached the issue of trust. Here's Pressley yesterday.
Look, I think this is the season of call a thing a thing. And so, I mean, that is how you rebuild trust. You know, so it's not the Republicans communicate in headlines, Democrats communicate in slide decks. You know, we've got to unlearn that. And so what happens is someone's at home and you're asked some question and you guys know, you know a pivot clearly, and folks are capitulating and, you know, worried about, you know, hurting feelings or, you know, something becoming a headline in a story that they don't want to. You know, it's a delicate dance here.
And by the way, one last thing before we get to calls at 877-301-8097. Even the Democrats don't like the Democrats. There was a poll that came out 2 days ago. Only 30% of Democrats are optimistic about the future of the Democratic Party. And I think one of the first things you have to do while you're looking for a new leader and a message is you got to be honest about what went before. If you were part of this cover-up, I think you got to acknowledge that. A lot of members of Congress, and by the way, a lot of members of his cabinet, as you said yesterday, couldn't even get meetings with him, so they can't, I don't think, be held responsible. Maybe they can, I don't know. Do you think the press, some of the press covered up? Chuck Todd thought not. Did you?
Well, I thought, and I am a member of the press, I thought that because I don't believe what Fox News says, I don't believe what a lot of the right wing says, that they were lying about the state of his agility. You know, you looked at him, you knew he had difficulty walking.
Well, so I don't care about his difficulty walking, frankly.
Well, let me finish.
I'm sorry.
I'm saying when you look at that, you say, well, walking is one thing.
Yeah.
Being able to, you know, function cognitively is a totally different thing. So
Correct.
It didn't really bother me that he didn't walk. What bothered me was his ability to talk. And I, until that debate, thought they were exaggerating.
So did I.
And so I can't say, I mean, I was fooled, I guess. I didn't intentionally lie about it. But you know the thing about the Democrats, though, Jim? They have a history of this. I mean, look at Dianne Feinstein, who was the senator from California, how long it took for her to leave. I mean, she was clearly in very difficult shape. A lot of people think Chuck Schumer should be out of there. Some people thought Nancy Pelosi should have been out of there, although I would argue she was very effective as a speaker. But the Democrats have, I think, a trust problem in terms of being frank with people. They shouldn't have nominated Hillary Clinton. She was the most unpopular person ever nominated.
Well, that has nothing to do about, what's that got to do with being honest?
It has to do with being truthful about your candidates. Thinking that this is the person, obviously, Joe Biden should have run against Donald Trump the first time around.
You know, there's an example right back here in our own state, a little bit older.
What's that?
Paul Tsongas. Senator Paul Tsongas ran for president in 92, didn't tell the truth about his cancer situation. And by the way, had he been elected instead of Bill Clinton, he would have died in office. So there is a history of this. We want to know what you think. 877-301-8097. As is typical for our audience, a lot of people don't even care about the conversation. Here's Tim and Milton. Don't worry about it, Marjorie. Even with a cold, you sound a lot better than Jim. An anonymous texter says, Marjorie's voice today sounds great. like Lauren Bacall
right.
in her prime.
That's right. I like to think of myself
as Lauren Bacall.
In her prime. I'm not sure I quite make
When
it.
she was punched out in The Sopranos, one of the most shocking moments in the history of The Sopranos.
I remember her better when she was running around with Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah, I remember that pretty well,
great,
too.
Great, sexy old movies.
Paul,
anyway, 877-301-8970 is the number.
Paul in New Hampshire, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hey, Paul.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Happy Friday.
Same to you. What's up?
Well, I've been listening to this back and forth, and like what's already been said, the debate was a shock, to say the least.
Yeah.
And I, for one, felt as though we were brought down the pristine path, that a lot of people were hiding the cognitive decline that Biden had. And I wonder how much of a boon it might have been if the people surrounding Biden had recognized that as well and allowed Kamala to step up and during his presidency, because he was clearly unable to serve properly. There was a lot going on. And would it have been that much different if Kamala took the reins and then we in turn held open primaries? I think it would have been a different scenario.
So do I. And I want to add one more factor to your little history there, Paul. I was watching Anderson Cooper on CNN the night of the debate, and one of the first guests on after Biden's performance was Vice President Harris doing what you got to do, which is defend the performance that was indefensible. And I think that really damaged her, because anybody who saw it knew that this was a diminished person and that she was not credible. And I think that got her off to a hell of a bad start, particularly in light of the fact that a lot of people in America didn't know much about her. So I agree with every word you said, Paul. Thank you very much for the call.
You know who bears a lot of blame for this cover-up in terms of what Jake Tapper said in his book
that?
Is cabinet members. He talks again about how cabinet meetings were terrible and sometimes very uncomfortable. And one cabinet secretary told the authors they were like this from the beginning of his second term. He had note cards and canned responses. I don't know how many cabinet members were quoted by name in the book. Tapper's been criticized for having a lot of anonymous sources, so I suspect they didn't talk to him with their names attached to the quotes. You know,
by the way, about the cabinet, so you have his cabinet not disclosing the fact that we had canned sessions, and you have Trump's cabinet going around the room in front of the boss saying it's the single greatest president,
right.
Single greatest program in the history of the modern world.
But the problem for Biden's legacy is that caller just said, had he stepped down earlier. I mean, I remember when he announced he said when he ran the first time that he was going to be a bridge president, transitional president. Yeah. When he announced he was going to run again, I remember thinking, what? No, you can't run again. Had he stepped down earlier, had it been open primaries, it probably wouldn't have been Kamala Harris running against it. It might have been somebody else with a longer runway to get ready, and we might not be looking at Donald Trump in the White House now.
I might have a slightly different approach to this than you do. I don't really care about the Biden part of this. Biden's done. I mean, he's going to go on The View, or as he did a few weeks ago. The issue is, for the average voter who isn't crazy about the Democratic Party anyway, can you trust them to tell you the truth? And I think this trickles out into almost everything. And I think the leaders have to confront it in a way that is hopefully not gratuitously cruel to Biden, because he did serve this country for decades and decades. But you can't hide out with this let's look forward BS and expect people to trust you.
You've also got a young, very interesting guy in David Hogg, who is a survivor of the Parkland shooting down in Florida, who's an official in the DNC now. And they're trying to get rid of him because he's talking about running primaries against candidates he views as ineffective Democrats. And, you know, it seems as though sometimes that they're all about how the process is supposed to work instead of about winning, because I think Hogg has got a point.
Let's go to Bernadette in a truck. You're next on Boston Public Radio. Welcome, Bernadette. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
You too.
Marjorie just talked about what I wanted to talk about, which is David Hogg and the younger Democrats. And I say throw all the old guys out. I'm not young, but I'm tired of being lied to and made a fool of by politicians. Can I trust every Democrat who's young? No. But I've seen Chris Murphy, Seth Moulton, David Hogg, Cory Booker, and Pete Buttigieg talk truth to power. And that's what I want to hear. I hate the Republican regime because they're killing our country. But Biden did this. she owns half of it. And I'm disgusted that he was allowed his arrogant move to run again. And it was a disgusting choice that all of his people propping him up made, and they gave us Trump. So, I'm not forgiving any of the old ones.
That's pretty obvious. Bernadette, thank you for the call. Remember what David Hogg said to us last time we were on? Last time David was with us, and we talked about, are we ever going to get gun control? What did he say?
When all the old people are dead.
No, he said when all of you are dead.
That's right. Looked at us and said when you're dead.
When you're dead.
So thank you, David. I'll try to hurry it up.
I don't think he meant us I think he meant the class of us is what his point was.
Here's Karen, who's in the library today. She's from Newton. She says, I am in the second camp. Leave Biden alone. He surrounded himself with reputable, intelligent, honorable cabinet people. We did fine. Indeed, there is no equivalency. So,
well, there is no equivalency, but it doesn't mean you can't talk about it, even though there isn't an equivalency. I agree with that. Suzanne in the car. Hi.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I have to say that I love listening to you both,
Thanks.
and it keeps me sane.
Good. Thank you.
I also want to say, though, that I do think that what happened with Biden is indefensible. I also think that there is plenty of history to say that this is not the first time this has happened to a president while in office, that it also happened with Reagan and many other people going back through history. So while it's indefensible, I am sort of with the idea that we have to move forward with a credible way of fixing this and realizing that it's patriotism to be honest about these things rather than to go forward trying to make something seem good that really isn't good. And also, I tend to agree with David Hogg. I think he makes some good points. We have to be a little bit more flexible and a little less interested in protecting the old in order to continue it.
Hey, well said, Suzanne. Thanks for the call.
The other comparison that's often made is Woodrow Wilson had a stroke and his wife hit it and ran the country.
Well, didn't Nancy Reagan sort of do it at the end of...
Because he had Alzheimer's, right? And lots of people think he had Alzheimer's at the beginning of his second term. Anyway, we're talking about what I guess you could call a cover-up of Joe Biden's cognitive problems when he decided to run for president again. What do you think? Do you blame him? Do you blame the Democratic Party? Do you not care because it's looking backwards? 877-301-8997 is the number to call or text. We're streaming at youtube.com/GBH News and broadcasting from the Boston Public Library.
The Eurovision Song Contest is known for campy spectacle and global bragging rights.
Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the Eurovision Song Contest 1968 is Spain.
But it's also been the scene of political intrigue and sabotage. Spain's Eurovision history next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from medical bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have any unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And New England Recovery Center, providing inpatient addiction treatment in state-of-the-art facilities located in Westboro, Mass. Learn more at newenglandrecoverycenter.org or by calling 1-877-MY-REHAB.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General, Andrea Campbell, will join us for an hour on May 21st. The Mayor of Boston will join us for an hour on May 28th. And in about 10 minutes, you're going to hear fabulous live music from Carbon Leaf. Stick around or show up for that. We're talking about new revelations. Well, I don't know how new they are, but documented revelations in this Jake Tapper book about the cognitive and physical decline of Joe Biden, and we're talking about what this means to you, and should we even be talking about it at all at 877-301-8970.
I got a couple of texts. Two things can be true at once. Trump can be an existential threat to the nation, while the Democratic Party leaders can be considered dishonest and unfit to lead. We need more young blood like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and David Hogg to split off and form a third party. Well, I don't know about that. The time is such that we would have a legitimate chance to be contenders. And Jeff in Andover says this book is incredibly important because I'm convinced if Biden backed out, say, Thanksgiving 23 and the Democrats had a normal primary, Donald Trump would not be the president. I think this means we cannot trust any Democrats who knew the truth, including Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris, to you
Kamala
too.
Harris.
Exactly. Yeah. Alan in Charlestown. Hi.
Hey.
Hey.
So, Jim, you talked about trust, and you can't trust Democrats. I mean, I guess the Republican hypocrite traitor to the Constitution are more trustworthy.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that, Alan. I surely didn't say
that. Choice, but I agree. So I saw Biden in Boston, and I saw Biden in New York City. And I know you saw Biden in Boston.
I saw it with the James Taylor thing. Yeah. And actually, I'm so glad you brought that up, for whatever it's worth. He didn't have a script. I'm so glad you brought that up. He didn't have a script. He spoke for maybe only 5 minutes, and he was totally coherent. It's weird to say.
That was one of the theories.
You're totally coherent. That he was fine.
That for some hours of the day, he was totally coherent.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That was a very good point.
But it wasn't many hours.
I'm sorry, Alan. Go ahead.
So, Jim, exactly. You were sitting in front of me, so that's why I know you were there. So he had cognition at that time.
Yeah.
In New York, I think in Boston he seemed frail. In New York, compared to Obama and Clinton, I rated the three of them coming out of there. Obama, I wish he could be president again. Clinton was shaky, and Obama was helping him a little bit.
Yeah.
But he could still carry it. Biden was out of it. I mean, he was trying his best, and I think a couple of times Obama had to well, Joe, kind of correcting him in a way that Obama can do it without criticizing you.
Well, for whatever it's worth, Alan, you're a big fan of Obama. Obama didn't say anything either, and Obama spent a lot of private time with him, and Obama's a pretty smart guy, so I'm assuming he knew what?
A huge mistake. He backed Hillary Clinton instead of Joe Biden.
I mean, the first round, yeah.
Yeah, I think Joe Biden would have beat Trump the first time.
Alan, thanks for the call. We really appreciate it. Nice to talk to you again. 877-301-8970.
Why do you choose someone who is so unpopular to run against Donald Trump when you're also the first woman, which makes it more difficult, and the baggage of the Clinton administration? What were the Democrats thinking?
Well, I think there's this whole next in line thing in politics. Not just the Democratic thing, by the way, even though it is a Democratic thing. It is much more
Democratic thing than Republicans,
whose turn is it as opposed to...
whose turn is it? And, which is why you wind up... And, somebody is just texting about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That's a great example that she was a great judge and she did as a lawyer, did great stuff for women's rights. But they wish she had retired sooner. To avoid the Supreme Court we have now.
Yes, indeed. Where do you want to go?
Bruce in the car. Thank you for calling.
Hey there, Bruce.
Hey, so my angle is if this whole thing was sort of a cover-up, I think anybody that knew what was really going on wasn't fooled by the cover-up. Cover-up was for the people that were not as interested or invested. I voted for him. I would have voted for him, like you guys said yesterday, if he'd been in a coma and an iron lung, brain dead. Because it's not just him, it's his entire administration that I'm voting for. It's his whole cabinet and all of the rest of the people around him that I'm voting for, as opposed to the alternative choice, which was far worse.
But Bruce, I think if you are in a coma and an iron lung and whatever else you are, you probably want to confess to it. You know what I mean? You don't want him to be...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it would have probably got him fewer votes if he'd been honest about it. So I understand why he did it and why the whole administration did it. And it was a wink and a nod to, hey, listen, you're not just voting for this guy, you're voting for more of this administration.
Yep.
Well, when you say, Bruce, I was with you for most of this. When you said you understand why I did it, I don't. I understand that it's the arrogance of power. The implication, or maybe it's explicit, is I've got to do this. I've got to continue this fiction, says he and the people closest to him, because there's no other Democrat who could possibly be strong enough or good enough to beat
But
Donald
don't you
Trump.
think-
I mean, it's ridiculous.
I got to disagree with you, Jim. I think it was more of a, modern times. This is how politics is played now. Nobody has integrity, so why should we bother trying to be so clean when it isn't going to actually help us?
Well, maybe you're right, Bruce. Thanks for the call. It was a good one. I appreciate it.
Or maybe his cognitive decline was such that he didn't realize how damaged he is. I mean, he's on The View.
Think Jill Biden recognized how limited he was at the end there?
Well, she was on The View last week, saying that he, with him when he said he would have won.
Well, it's a rehab tour. I mean, it's a rehab tour, and I hear that. And you can be loyal to your partner, to your husband, and loyal to the country at the same time. And I think there was disloyalty by those closest to Biden to put him in that position. What are people going to remember? Maybe not in 50 years. What do people remember most about Joe Biden? Not the most significant investment in the environment in American history, not only saving people during COVID, and that he lied to the American people. So what did he get out of this? I would say he got disgraced, which is unfortunate because this is a guy who, other than maybe the Anita Hill deal, did a lot of good things for close to 50 years in public office. Michelle in the car. Hi.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to say I agree with you 100% that Biden should not have run a second term. He told us he would not run a second term. There's so many other great candidates like Amy Klobuchar, Buttigieg, even our own Seth Walton. He is up and coming. And it just really disappointed me how Kamala Harris was just kicked in there because there should have been a primary. And I think a lot of people are going to lose respect for the Democrats. I'm one of them. But you know what? I think the real failure is, Jim and Marjorie, is that this guy had Alzheimer's or dementia, whatever it was, and we should be addressing that as a nation. We should be confronting that. Everyone knows somebody who has this, and it's sad. And rather than say, he's fine, oh, don't pay attention to Grandpa, say, no, this is a real struggle for our elderly folks, and we're going to embrace this, and we're going to look for cures.
Hey, Michelle, I have good news for you.
Thank you.
I have good news for you. We are addressing it as a nation. When RFK Jr. testified in front of Congress 2 days ago, he complimented his cousin, Maria Shriver, for the wonderful work she had done on Alzheimer's. What he failed to tell us is at the same time that he was complimenting her, he was cutting the HHS budget for Alzheimer's research. So we got half the story.
He's up there saying, oh, no, those programs that I took away were restored. And then the guy that was at the place where the program's supposed to be restored said, no, they haven't been restored. So he's lying all the time, too.
By the way, can I say one thing? Wait, that one caller mentioned Seth Moulton as a young leader. Moulton was one of the earliest Democrats who told the truth about this. I can't remember if it was after the debate or when it was, but Moulton, I think at great personal cost, because he got attacked by fellow Democrats, said he had great respect for Biden, that Biden had been a mentor to him, but that he could not run for re-election.
Well, he was damaged because he went after Nancy Pelosi for the same reason, and Nancy Pelosi seemed to be pretty with it in her last term as
Well, it wasn't because she had lost it. It's because she was really old.
Yeah, okay. I'm getting a lot of texts like this, and I just want to address it. This one is from Pete in New Hampshire, but it's the same theme others have said. Even before Biden was elected, conservatives were saying Biden wasn't all there, and we were labeled conspiracy theorists as the media covered for him. Pete, I would say the thing, I don't think the media was necessarily covering for him. I think the people that were saying he had lost it were the same people that were setting up these videos of Nancy Pelosi looking drunk when she wasn't, and the same places.
The deep fakes.
The deep fakes, the people that lie about it. And I would say, we know they cost him almost $1 billion that Fox News lied about the election being stolen. So when people lie to you all the time, it's hard for me to believe them. And that's why one of the big reasons I did not believe them, because the source was unreliable. Anyway, and I don't think the media necessarily covered for him. I think that a lot of the media did not know. Those people that would be
Chuck's position.
Closest to him would know, but his aides covered up for him in press conferences, small press conferences, big ones whenever he's meeting the press, so that people that were covering him wouldn't know.
By the way, for those who feel cheated because we're not talking about the sins of Donald Trump today, former federal judge Nancy Gertner will join us at 1 o'clock.
That's right.
To talk about the birthright citizenship case yesterday, nationwide injunctions, Abrego Garcia Garcia and whether or not he's ever going to be released from that prison in El Salvador, and much more.
Okay, we are moving on because we have got some fantastic music coming up. Time for a Live Music Friday, and this week we're going to hear from indie rockers Carbon Leaf. You do not want to miss this. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, move over baked beans and make way for crispy duck confit because the Michelin Guide is officially debuting in Boston. And when it comes to the famed French Film Festival, there are can-dos and can-don'ts. New rules mean no nudity on the red carpet, plus a thorny issue. Pete Rose is now eligible for induction into the Baseball Hall of Fame. That and more on The Culture Show's Week in Review today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts and working to connect industry leaders to graduates, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate. And Blythewald, with big, beautiful bamboo birds. 6 sculptures in the gardens, 15 to 30 feet tall, by artist duo The Mythmakers. Blythewald.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Welcome to another round of Live Music Friday. Actually, before I introduce the band, speaking of live music, we just heard Keith Lockhart, the conductor of the Boston Pops, who screws us every year when he promises he'll tell us in advance who's going to be performing in the Esplanade on July 4th. They called this morning. He's coming on Tuesday. He's calling in to give us the scoop on July 4th. So make sure you tune in on Tuesday. We are joined by Virginia-based indie rockers Carbon Leaf. They've been through it all in the 30-plus years together, from slow beginnings to what looked from the outside like overnight success with the song The Boxer, to getting signed to a major label, providing the soundtrack to Curious George, and then later on, carving their own paths forward as independent artists while keeping a direct line to their die-hard fan base. Last fall, they released their 15th studio album called Time is the Playground. They're in town for a headline show tonight at the Spire Center. That's in Plymouth. It's 8 o'clock. For tickets and info, go to Spire, as in S-P-I-R-E, center.org or carbonleaf.com. But they're performing for us first. Here's Carbon Leaf performing Life Less Ordinary. Welcome, gentlemen. Glad to have you. Ordinary. A few of you guys are going to come join us, please. We're going to be joined by Barry Privet, Terry Clark. In fact, we are being joined by Barry Privet, Terry Clark, and Jesse Humphrey. And gentlemen, if you can put those headphone things on, and we can have a conversation. That was fabulous.
That was great. That was great, you guys. So Barry, tell us who the other guys are in the band.
So we have Terry to my right, Jesse, guitar and drums here, and then over here, they didn't make the cut for the interview, is John Markle on the bass, Carter Gravett on guitar. I can't hear you, John. Sorry.
They said one of us talks too much and one of us doesn't talk.
Same with us, actually.
Okay,
Same deal.
okay. And you've been together, we'll ask Terry this, you've been together for how long?
About 30 years.
Yeah,
we started in college and just didn't know enough to stop.
And you don't want to like kill each other or anything driving around that 55-foot?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
You know, Barry, we've actually been together almost the exact same time doing this as you've been doing this. There have been some low moments, I should say. Do you like each other, or you just perform with each other?
We were having this conversation with somebody last week on a different show, and we were like, he asked, how long have you been together? I was like, I think all in maybe 33 years, and he goes, that's a really long marriage.
Yeah, it is a very...
How's it going, though? You didn't answer the question.
It's going great today.
Today, is that what you said?
I mean, look.
Yeah, it's great. We started out as friends in college when the band started, before we even
college?
started the
Where was
band.
college?
Randolph-Macon College in Ashland, Virginia.
So you were all together in the same college?
Yeah,
okay.
and it's a little tiny school and not many musicians, so everybody knew everybody else, and we started the band there, and we've been friends ever since. So, we fight like brothers, but then we make up like brothers, so all of our families are friends, so we do, cookouts and hang out together and have, family jamborees basically too. So it's a cool vibe.
Very nice.
And you're the new kid on the block, right?
That's right.
And you're the dreaded local angle from you're the Cranston, Cranston, Rhode Island kid?
It's Cranston.
Cranston,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
How'd you hook up with these guys?
I was playing with a group before I was playing with them about, maybe 7-8 years ago. And I lived up in Boston at the time and linked up with them through a tour manager and stuff like that. So then we ended up, Barry sent me an email and kind of ended up trying it out. And it's been almost 8-9 years now.
What'd you think of the band before you joined it? Tell the truth.
I honestly never heard of them.
Oh, no.
No, I mean, I heard the name of the band, but I didn't know the music before then.
But maybe you heard Boxer, though. I mean,
I had heard the Boxer.
I knew Boxer. I didn't necessarily know it was you guys that were coming today. Tell us about that. That was like a huge hit for you.
Yeah, it was. The Boxer was a song that we recorded just as an independent band, and we ended up entering a contest. This was like in 2001 on the internet back then. It was like a big deal. You could upload a song, and it went all the way to the top, and it was the Coca-Cola New Music Award for the American Music Awards.
Wow.
And we got to perform in the AMAs and meet Dick Clark. And
Dick Clark?
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
And it was just a song that we made in our basement and recorded in one day at a studio in town in Richmond, and then it just kind of got legs. And then when we went through and won that contest, then stations started picking up across the country. We were an unsigned band, so The River in Boston, WBOS picked up the song, and it kind of just added kind of wind in our sails at the right time.
Yeah, I think Barry at one point called it the little song that could. It was just like it just kind of kept going.
Yeah.
So Terry, that was a pivotal moment. I think a lot of us saw the moment. But was your Uber ride down here today another pivotal moment, would you say, for the band?
It was the best Uber
Could you
we've
describe that
ever
for people
taken.
you haven't told the story to yet?
First of all, as a father of 3, I drive an old beat-up Honda minivan, and so I was like, we need an Uber XL, you guys. I'm actually ordering a double XL for this morning. And I was like, okay, it's a gray Honda minivan. You guys, I'm sorry. You guys, sorry about that. And it rolls up. It's a brand new Honda minivan. We get in, and this guy's got a disco ball between the driver's seat and the passenger seat, and 4 wireless microphones.
He just starts pulling them out.
He just pulls them out of his jacket.
He's like,
He didn't know we were musicians.
He's like, pair your phone, and you guys can do karaoke. And we're like, heck yeah, we're doing karaoke.
Did you video it?
We did.
Videoed it. Is that going to be online at some point?
We'll put it up at some point. But yeah, we did karaoke the whole ride over. It was amazing.
That's pretty great.
So you talked in some of the stuff I read in anticipation of talking to you guys today, talking about working with a record label and then not working with a record label. And I'm really curious now in 2025 with everything, Spotify, et cetera, the business is going to be so different.
It's completely different from when we started. I
Yeah.
mean, when we started, we were handing out, a 4-song cassette tapes, and
Exactly.
putting stamps on little cards and mailing out our shows. And so, the thing we need to always focus on is just the fans that are paying attention instead of the rest of the world that, may not be looking, towards us. And, we've kind of followed that ethos through being independent, through being on a record label for a few years and then going back to independence. It was like, let's fish, let's just fish where we know there's fans instead of throwing nets everywhere else. And it's worked out pretty well so far.
So I'm sorry,
go ahead.
When you guys met with this college thing, and if I had talked to you then and said, so 30 years you're going to be doing the library show here at the in Boston, did you even imagine at this age doing this with the same people?
No, not at all. But I do remember in our first apartment, and we had just started in Richmond. We was like this really funky place. We practiced in the basement, and there were rats and weird. But there were like 4 or 5 bands all kind of on the same corner, and it was like this cool, fun vibe. And at one point, we had just finished our first record, I think, and released an actual CD and stuff. And I was like, Barry, this is it. We're going to make it. And we were sort of like writing your kids' heights on where you measure up. We wrote it on the wall. It's like, we're going to be signed by this date next year or 2 years or whatever it was. We're going to be signed to a record label. And of course, we weren't at all signed to a record label anytime soon after that.
That's what's great about being young and naive and arrogant. You just kind of like, this is going to happen. And
Which of those 3 are you now? Which young, naive, arrogant. How many of those 3 are you still?
We're just arrogant at this point.
Marjorie and I went to the Gillette Stadium, as it was called, about 6 months ago with friends, and we saw the Rolling Stones. And Mick Jagger was a mere 81 years old. And I have to say, I don't know if you've seen him in recent times.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. The energy.
He danced for 2 hours. He ran up and down the runway thing. I couldn't believe it.
So can this can go on forever, right? Until you're unhappy? Is that the deal?
That's a great way of putting it.
No, I'm serious.
This can go on forever until you're unhappy.
Is that not the way? I mean, no?
Yeah. Keith Richards was not moving, as I recall.
No, he was not.
But Mick Jagger was.
He never moved much anyhow.
Yeah.
So,
What were we going to say, Barry?
You have 5 guys in a band or any group of artists that come together to make a singular thing. And it's something that we, have to consider very carefully. It's not just like a front guy with, some blokes behind you playing instruments. It's like this is the collective personality and spirit of what we're doing. And so, it's a miracle that any act can last as long as the Rolling Stones or, whoever. But, I think at a certain point, if it's not the 5 of us, it just doesn't feel like maybe it's not worth it. I don't know. But we can't worry about that today. This is kind of the now, and this is what we're focused on.
So, Jesse, tell us about the new album, Time in the Playground. I get a sense that's a lot about time.
Jesse, tell me.
I'm going to give that over to Barry. Barry writes a lot of all the lyrics, so
Okay.
he can explain it better.
Yeah, Time is the Playground was, we were queuing up a new album, and this was around the time the pandemic hit, and our world was already booked for the coming year, and we had to cancel all that and kind of redirect our energy somehow, and all the guys that had families had to move into family mode, so I'm stuck with a lot of time on my hands to figure out what the next project's going to be. And the guys in their spare time are shooting me some demos of some little, riffs or ideas to look at, and I'm collecting those in a pot. And I'm also thinking about, I just start, when the pandemic, you kind of get in a certain headspace, and you start thinking about your life and your kind of place in like the now and where it's going and where you've been. And so I was getting very, I was looking through our old material and realizing there was a lot of stuff that we had started working on that we kind of abandoned because we loved the idea, but I just couldn't figure out a way into or out of the story. And so by grabbing some of these old pieces that were maybe 10, 15 years old and some of these new things the guys were bringing together, I started thinking about like just the different times these were written and where I started with writing some of these old things, where I am now, what I want to write for the future. And it just became like, and then at the same time, I'd come across an old Post-it note that I'd written "Time is the Playground" on it. And I was like, that's the title for the album. I'm going to take these old songs, I'm going to take these new songs, we're going to put them in a pot, and we're going to stir up something that is related to time. And every single song on the album kind of references time in some kind of way, and you know, where you are in that timeline.
10 years since the last album, right? Is it 10 years, roughly?
Since our first full length, but we've written some EPs and things like that.
But, I'm making an analogy, if I may. Standing there not too long ago was Doris Kearns Goodwin, who took 10 years to write Team of Rivals.
Yeah.
And one of the things we asked her was, since it took so long, isn't your anxiety level even higher about how it's going to be received because you spent a decade of your life? Does that apply to you?
Well, yeah, I think in terms of the fans, because when we announced the album, it was like, this is coming out next year. Well, it ended up turning into 4 years because of the pandemic. Everything just ripple effect, and the fans were kind of like, okay, is this really happening? And we were like, yes, it is. And there were several times where we could have just said, you know what, we're late, let's do it. But if the music's not right, we just have learned to just push the release date away, focus on that, and when we know it's what we want, then it's ready.
So that's one of the real positives of being our own record label and being our own bosses. I make the joke, is like, when we left the record label, we fired the man, and then we made Barry the man. Barry's now the man, so we can set our own timetables. We have our own studio. We can take our time if something's not ready, if we're not feeling it.
Speaking of feeling it, can I read a couple of texts? Anonymous texter, I heard that song for the first time when I was in Iraq in 2006. Wow. Love these guys ever since. Joyce on YouTube. Carbon Leaf rocks. We have experienced their talent many times in person in New Hampshire. Paula on YouTube, one of my favorite songs ever. They sounded so good at the library. David, last one I'll read for now. There are many more. Carbon Leaf is our favorite band. We've been going to see them for 23 years. Those guys rock. First time we saw them, my son was not born. The last time I hung out with Barry's nephew all night. That is so great. What's the P stand for?
This is the Pawtucket Red Sox.
Pawtucket Red Sox.
But they are no more.
I know, but I'm keeping it alive because that's where they should be.
That's where they should be. You are right. It was terrible. I felt very bad for Pawtucket when they moved to Worcester.
I know, and then they just knocked down McCoy Stadium too, which was all. I spent so much time there, sang the national anthem there a bunch of times.
You did?
Saw tons of games as a kid.
Oh my God!
I loved that place, and it was sad to see.
Could you play or you're no?
I played in high school.
Were you any good?
I was okay.
Yeah.
I can hit bombs.
I can hit bombs. Listen to this guy.
There you go. Who writes all the music? Do you write together or do you do it by yourself?
It's a band. The guys are turning in ideas. I write the lyrics and the melodies and kind of the theme side of it, right? The story. But the guys all have a bunch of different styles that they lean in on, and they'll just say, hey, is this a thing? And we add it to our pile. And
we generally write music first, so it'll be an iPhone idea or the whole band at rehearsal or sound check, or some of them are just a few chords, and some of them are fully fleshed out musical ideas. We give them to Barry and they go into
Let me tell you, you sounded great then. You sound unbelievable now. You're going to be at the Spire Center tonight in Plymouth, 8 p.m. For tickets or info, spirecenter.org or carbonleaf.com. What are you going to play, Barry? And then you guys should return to your bandmates. What are you playing?
Yeah, we're going to play a song off the new album. It's called California Gold.
Great. Can you gently put the headphones down and we'll tell people again where they get tickets and all that sort of thing.
Okay, this is Carbon Leaf again. They're performing California Gold, as Jim just said. They're in town for a show tonight at the Spire Center in Plymouth, 8 o'clock. For tickets and info, go to spirecenter.org. That's Spire, S-P-I-R-E, spirecenter.org, or carbonleaf.com.
And here they are, Carbon Leaf performing California Gold. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Everything looks the same, but everything else has changed. Everybody knows my name, I'm on my own. There's nothing here I can hold, there's no story I haven't told. I'm I'm heading for the other coast in search of California gold. Sunbeams for a smile, Cali blue skies for miles, San Diego for a while, I'll call you home. And all we have is time, lay it on down the line, find the missing pieces as we go. We're taking the slowest road for now, let the windows paint the scene. We're living the fever dream, California gold, California gold. Down the line, we'll find the missing pieces as we go. We're taking the slowest road for now, just let the windows paint the scene. We'll fall into anything, California gold, California gold.
Carbon Leaf, and by the way, we left out yet another opportunity to see these guys Saturday, May 17th, which will be tomorrow. Shallon Lou, the fabulous, fabulous venue in Rockport. That's them tomorrow night. Same deal, carbonleaf.com.
I want to mention Emily and Quincy just texted, Carbon Leaf brings back so many memories of being a student at Virginia Tech, seeing them at small college venues. So happy they're joining my favorite talk show, so that was nice for you and for us too. Thank you very much.
You were
okay,
fabulous.
So once again,
so much,
Carbon Leaf performing tonight at 8 o'clock at the Spire Center in Plymouth. They're also going to be May 17th up at the Shallon Lou Center in Rockport. For tickets and info, go to carbonleaf.com, or for tonight in Plymouth, go to spirecenter.org. That's spirecenter.org or carbonleaf.com. Thank you very much for coming in, you guys. Coming up after the new news, we're going to talk to Axios business editor Dan Primack. He's going to talk about the president's business deals over in the Middle East this week. The question is, are they about the United States of America or about making the Trump family richer and richer? You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And Porter Square Books, hosting Gloria Brown Marshall with A Protest History of the United States, exploring 400 years of resistance. May 20th at 7 at PSB Boston Edition. Info at portersquarebooks.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News, what matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on the second hour of BPR live from the library. We talked with Axios business editor Dan Primack about Donald Trump continuing to make deals while his kids also make deals across the Middle East. Meanwhile, back at home, retailers like Walmart are raising prices despite the pause in U.S.-China trade war. And we'll talk to him about the proposal to stop taxing tips and overtime.
I'm Marjorie Egan. American Experience has come out with a new documentary following the genius behind Polaroid, Edwin Land. We'll talk with director Gene Tempest American Experience executive producer Cameo George about Lance's incredible inventions and complicated legacy. Then we'll meet a Boston-based artist who makes masterpieces in miniature, Armani Thomas. It's all ahead in the second hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Talks between Russian and Ukrainian delegations in Turkey are over. They were supposed to focus on ending Russia's war in Ukraine. President Trump is on his way home from his trip to the Middle East. NPR's Franco Ordonez reports Trump decided not to stop in Istanbul for the talks.
At the beginning of his trip, President Trump teased that he might go to Turkey, but Russian President Vladimir Putin didn't show up. And Trump said this morning he doesn't think anything will happen until they meet.
You know, they all said Putin was going and Zelensky was going, and I said, if I don't go, I guarantee Putin's not going. And he didn't go, and I understand that, but we're going to get it. We're going to get it done. We've got to get it done.
Trump said it's time and that he'll meet Putin as soon as a meeting can be set up. He didn't go to Turkey today because, he said, he needs to get back to meet his new grandchild. His daughter, Tiffany, just had a baby. Franco Ordonez, NPR News, Abu Dhabi.
From Mumbai, NPR's Dia Hadid reports that President Trump has lashed out at the CEO of Apple, Tim Cook, after he said that most iPhones sold in the U.S. will come from India. That may complicate India's hopes of replacing China as a global base for iPhone manufacturing.
President Trump said this during his whistle-stop tour of the Gulf.
I said, Tim, look, we've treated you really good. We put up with all the plants that you built in China for years. Now you got to build us. We're not interested in you building in India.
It came after CNBC quoted Tim Cook as saying that he expected most iPhones to be built in India. India has long sought to siphon more iPhone manufacturing from China. It already makes nearly 15% of all iPhones. India is also negotiating a trade deal with the United States, which it hopes will curb 26% tariffs that Trump has vowed to slap on the country. It's so far unclear if these tensions over where iPhones should be built will hinder that deal. Dia Hadid, NPR News, Mumbai.
Sean Diddy Combs' sex trafficking and racketeering trial in New York will conclude a week of testimony today, with the defense cross-examining the prosecution's star witness. R&B singer Cassie Ventura has alleged in graphic detail that her powerful hip-hop mogul ex-boyfriend had for years sexually and physically and emotionally abused her, forced her into taking part in drug-fueled sex parties, and prevented her from pursuing her music career. NPR's Isabela Gomez-Sarmiento says the defense is attempting to undermine her testimony.
The defense admitted that Combs has been violent, but they say he didn't coerce or traffic anyone. So when they began cross-examining Ventura, they relied heavily on text message evidence. They had her read out loud these loving, caring texts she exchanged with Combs over the years. The defense is really trying to establish grounds for consent.
NPR's Isabela Gomez-Sarmiento. This is NPR News.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The Trump administration is looking into whether Harvard is still factoring in race when it comes to student admissions. From our higher ed desk, GBH's Kirk Carapezza reports the federal investigation comes nearly 2 years after the U.S. Supreme Court decided that the consideration of race in admissions is unconstitutional.
Harvard was the named plaintiff in the landmark case that upended 4 decades of precedent. Now, the Trump administration says it wants to know if the university has been abiding by the decision. A Harvard spokesperson says the school continues to comply with the law and describes the investigation as, quote, abusive and retaliatory. Harvard has clashed with the Trump administration in recent months over its hiring and admissions policies, as well as its tax-exempt status, with the administration freezing billions in federal funding. Kirk Carapezza, GBH News.
In GBH Business News, Dick's Sporting Goods is buying Foot Locker for $2.4 billion. Foot Locker, which has been struggling as of late, operates 2,400 stores around the world, while Dick's has 800 stores, all of which are in the United States. In sports, tonight's Celtics-Knicks game in New York, a gangrene win sends the series to a 7th game in Boston on Monday. A gangrene loss ends the season. And a big left-handers pitchers duel at friendly Fenway tonight with with Garrett Crochet going for the Red Sox versus Chris Sale. Remember him for the Braves. Keep an eye on the Boston K-Men tonight, too. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance with Snapshot, a personalized program that bases rates on safe driving habits, at Progressive.com. Not available in California or from all agents. This is NPR.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. I'm a little I got a cold, so sorry about my voice. The Attorney General is going to be here with us May 31st, Andrea Campbell. And Michelle Wu, the Mayor of Boston, is going to be with us May 28th from noon to 1. Andrea Campbell's going to be here 1 to 2. May 21st. Hello again, Jim.
Carbon Leaf was great. Were they great?
Were great.
They were
we got tons of texts from people that really
great.
I love them. I got to go right online after.
Lifted my miserable spirits, I should say.
Well, that's good, Jim.
We're joined now, but we'll go back to the depths with Dan. We're joined now at the library by Dan Primack. Dan is a business editor at Axios and author of the daily Axios Pro Rata newsletter. Dan, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
I cannot sing, so.
Nor can we.
No, we can't either. So Dan, I'm reading the stuff about the president, and Eric's over there, and Don Jr.'s over there, and they're, all over in the Middle East, all these countries that we didn't used to like very much. Is this about helping us here in the United States, or is this just about them just making more money over there with the Saudis and the UAE and everybody else?
I'm not sure it can't be both.
Yeah.
Which is what it seems to be, right? So clearly the self-dealing piece is a thing, right? And it's complicated when when you're president and you have adult children who are in business, not in nonprofits or not in college, let alone younger like Obama's kids were. But they are certainly trading on the president's name. Whether that's illegal is a different question. It might just be a little bit shady and immoral.
Just shady and immoral. No, that's a good point.
That was one of the big things that Biden was in trouble with Hunter.
Yeah, it's politics. Hypocrisy is allowed.
Yeah.
But in terms of, for the U.S., there's all these promises that are getting made, right? You had this supposed, I think it was, $600 billion from Saudi into the United States, another couple $100 billion from Qatar. If these things come to pass, that's good for the United States, right? Billions of dollars in investment in tech and manufacturing, et cetera, into the U.S., that's good. Every country wants foreign direct investment. The devil's in the details, though, and the question is, are these press releases, is this really kind of policy by press release? In other words, it's not really worth the paper it's written on. That's going to remain to be seen. There were lots of promises also made during the first Trump administration, including from Saudi, most of which didn't come to pass. Some of which was simply because corporations decided to bail because conditions changed, some of which because it was kind of BS in the first place.
Yeah, it sounded like you suspect a lot of it is BS from what I read from you, that it is... I'll make these announcements, and then when it doesn't come to pass,
well, we tried. So they put out this press release about $600 billion, which is a lot of money. And then they had itemized part of it. There was some money for Boeing, or not for Boeing, but to buy Boeing planes, some from GE Vernova to buy wind turbines. It was a big, almost $160, $170 billion in military purchases or purchases of weapons. But it didn't come to even half of what the headline number was. And we reached out to the White House to say, can you give us something else? I get maybe you can't get all the way to 600, but could you, get us at least maybe past halfway? And they declined repeatedly to do that.
Okay.
So I know you're not a lawyer, but does the business community care if this is immoral, shady, or even illegal, or do they just care about the investment becoming real?
Well, they care more about the investment becoming real. The stuff we're talking about with Trump, or Trump's family is the best way to put it, which is mostly crypto stuff, right? There's been just a bunch of crypto projects. As far as the business community is concerned, it doesn't really impact them one way or the other. If a bunch of individuals get wiped out because they buy some sort of coin, that doesn't impact the CEO of a widget maker.
Speaking of crypto, was it not that it was? I don't know if it was crypto, but talk about questionable investments. Wasn't there that little tiny Chinese company that had absolutely no revenue, zero revenue, that invested $300 million in Strump or whatever the hell did a week or so ago?
There was. Foxconn's different. Foxconn's a real company. They make iPhones, et cetera. They had promised to build a giant factory in Wisconsin. $6 billion. I think they're about $800 million in. 7 years later.
No, he's talking
So
about
is this thing just a pass-through from the Chinese government? And what else could it be?
I mean, it may be. We just don't know. I mean, I can't really speculate. It could be a pass-through from some Chinese billionaires trying to curry favor in some way.
So, I'm sorry, can we stay on Middle
crypto?
East? No, Middle East.
Well, okay, I want to talk about crypto after.
You do crypto, I'll do the Middle East.
Just a thing, and you know, this is your area of business and the economy and all this, but just from my reading, it sounds to me like what Trump is able to do is regulate the industry, the crypto industry, that he's standing to make millions and billions of dollars.
Deregulate the crypto industry,
Yeah. So, I mean, but he's making the decisions. That's not...
You know what someone said about that? It was shady and immoral. Do you remember?
But is it illegal?
It does not seem to be necessarily illegal.
Okay.
What's interesting about this, one of the things that's interesting is the guy who he put in charge of crypto policy is a venture capitalist named David Sachs, who's part of kind of the whole Peter Thiel, Elon circle.
Yeah.
But Sachs was a venture capitalist for years, had a lot of crypto investments. When he took the job, he actually divested most of his crypto investments. There's a White House memo detailing all the stuff he sold, basically to avoid the conflicts of interest. So it's interesting that the private sector guy who he brought in, really not even as a full-time government employee, as an advisor, decided he had to sell everything to have legitimacy, but his boss, or at least his boss's family, is actually diving much deeper into this than they ever were before.
Can I stay on shady and immoral just for a second,
That's
but not in
shady and
business?
immoral, I would say.
Here is Trump in the Middle East talking Tuesday in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. Here he is.
It's crucial for the wider world to note this great transformation has not come from Western interventionalists or flying people in beautiful planes giving you lectures on how to live and how to govern your own affairs. No, the gleaming marvels of Riyadh and Abu Dhabi were not created by the so-called nation builders, neocons, or liberal nonprofits like those who spend trillions and trillions of dollars failing.
Now, that's not an economic thing. To me, that's what he's basically saying, if I can translate, is we don't give a damn about human rights anymore. We don't care about them supporting Hamas. We don't care about the execution of a journalist at the Washington Post. We care about the bottom line. Okay, I have another bottom line question, which is sort of symptomatic of how one day Trump's here, one day's there. He has helped, not that they haven't helped themselves, Boeing destroy its reputation. I mean, obviously, Boeing's had a huge amount of problems.
Boeing's done a lot of that. They've walked into enough walls on their own.
But he sure as hell hasn't helped them by trashing them for not getting them Air Force Ones in time and then saying, I want that $400 million plane from the Qataris. But then, on the same note, was the order that was placed on his trip of Boeing planes the largest order in the history of Boeing?
I believe so.
So how do you juxtapose, or is it just Trump being Trump? Trashing a company and damaging them and then giving them, not a windfall, but an investment that is huge.
I think it's Trump being Trump. I mean, the windfall investment's big, right? Because it adds to that total. So there was some from Qatar, there was some from Saudi. That adds to the total of the foreign investment in, and he gets to, brag about that, and it might help him he's not running theoretically, but electorally or not, but he gets to brag about it. As for the Air Force One thing, I think that was more arguably about personal pettiness. He wants a nice plane. I don't think he was, I mean, I'm not in the guy's brain. I don't think he was thinking so much, if I say this will hurt Boeing or it'll hurt their stock or maybe they'll work faster. I think he wants his plane. He wants the fanciest plane. There's reports that when he flew into Riyadh, he was seeing all these other kind of Monarch planes lined up on the tarmac, and he was like, mine is smaller than theirs. The man wants to have the biggest plane.
He wants a plane, and I suspect that before it winds up at the library, the Trump library, if he ever gets his plane, he's going to be flying around the country.
Maybe it's a weird plane. For what it's worth, and a colleague of mine dove into this, so there's only a small handful of airports in the world that this thing can actually land on.
Because of its size?
Because of its size.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Remember when those big new Airbuses came out and there was these talk that most runways couldn't handle them because of the weight. This plane is similar to that, except bigger. And then just the amount it would cost, I think it's something like, just to run it for a year would be like $40 or $45 million just to operate it. Granted, you'd probably rent it out a bit. It's expensive. Knowing Trump, it's hard to imagine he's going to want to spend that kind of money running a plane.
Yeah.
Well, not that this is in your bailiwick either, but I think it was Juliette Kayyem, national security person, that told us this a day or two ago. It's one thing to rewire the whole thing to make sure it's safe. Now, I don't know if he cares about that. But the inability to have a refueling capacity when you have the leader of the world in a plane. They can't adapt it for that, from what I understand. But it's a big, beautiful plane, so it doesn't really matter.
It's a big, beautiful plane. It's got a lot of gold on the inside of it.
Or it will have a lot of gold on the inside. We're talking to Dan Primack from Axios.
So this isn't about the Middle East, but it kind of drove me crazy. The Saudis are all over here for the Live Golf Tournament at Trump's golf course. And once again, all pumping all this money. And I guess we don't care about the Emoluments Clause anymore. That's so yesterday. But there's just something creepy about it, that they're pouring all this money into his golf course, into his family, into his money, and then he's going to make deals with them. Same thing with Qatar or Qatar, whatever you want to call it. The whole thing, but people don't seem to care.
People don't. I mean, you could forgive people for not knowing, say, going into his first term, but obviously, I mean, a lot of this, not maybe to this extent, but this stuff happened during his first term too, and people reelected him, or after taking 4 years off. So people clearly, the general voting public does not care because they knew about this. Or they don't know.
That's what I wondered. Do they not know or not care?
I think it's more they don't care. I can't speak for everyone who votes, but I think it's more they don't care. This was pretty well publicized, and for the Saudis, by the way, it's worth noting the Saudis have been doing a lot trying to diversify their economy and buy. It's not just in the United States. They've been trying to get investments all over the world. They're trying basically not to be completely reliant on oil coming out of the ground.
Yeah, we want to be more reliant on oil back
Let me
here.
just say also, in the spirit of fairness here, as we said a day or two ago, as appalled as I am that Trump doesn't give a damn about human rights, after Biden campaigning and talking about Saudi Arabia, he did do the fist bump.
He did.
With the Crown Prince, which was just, I think, a horrible day for this country. Can we go to China for a second? So they cut a deal of some sort. There's a
preliminary deal.
A 90 day. What is the deal, and what's the prospect for something good to happen, whatever it is, 80 days hence?
The immediate deal, so go back, whatever it is now, a month and a half ago to April 2nd, Trump raised tariffs on almost everything coming out of China by a ton, over 100%. China responded with giant tariffs of their own. The deal they signed, whatever it was, over this past weekend, it basically keeps the 10% baseline tariffs. There's still high tariffs on a variety of different industries, automotives, et cetera. There's still the so-called high tariffs on the so-called de minimis, which are the really cheap items, basically the clothes that people buy from things like Shein and Temu.
Yeah.
But in general, there's a 90-day pause on the vast majority of the tariffs. But again, it's a 90-day pause. It's basically a negotiating window.
And all they did was the accomplishment, in quote, was I assess an immense tariff and then I withdraw.
Withdraw most of it. Not all of it, but most of it.
So it's 10% and 30% and then some of the things you talked
Correct.
about a minute ago. And so when we see that Walmart's is raising prices, which obviously matters a lot, I would assume, to a guy said, I'm going to fix the economy on day one. Is that a function of China, or is that a function of all the tariffs, cumulative impact around the world?
More the latter. I mean, China's a piece of that. But if you think about, if you go home and look at the tags in your clothes or anything, a toy you buy for your kids, a lot of it's coming from China. A ton of it comes from Vietnam. A ton of it comes from India. And remember, coming out of the pandemic, the big lesson for companies, and this had nothing to do with tariffs, it had to do with supply chains, was diversify your supply chain. If you have everything coming out of China and the country shuts down because of a virus, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So, put 30% of it in Vietnam or put 30% of it in India. Companies did that, but there's now big tariffs on those countries.
Yeah.
So what do we think that this is going to mean? I mean, there was talk about a possible recession. We just don't know, I guess.
We never know. I mean, a lot of the Wall Street banks that are predicting a recession now also were predicting one in 2022 and 2023 and 2024. So they don't have a great batting average.
Yeah.
And I think there's just so much we don't know, right? We don't know what happens after 90 days. There's a school of thought that thinks Trump will just, punt because he ultimately doesn't really want 150% tariffs. It would be a disaster for the U.S. economy. You'd have empty shelves in Walmart, et cetera. But I think we don't know. What we do know is that there was a huge amount of imports ahead of the tariffs. So we haven't seen a lot of empty shelves or really any empty shelves yet. Then the ports were basically empty for about 5 days to a week. And now you're hearing about countries, particularly China, a lot of ramping up of manufacturing, try to push as much product out during this 90 days as possible. But it takes a while for a ship to, get from Hong Kong or wherever here.
Can we come back to the United States? The House, a couple of days ago, began on long party lines passing much of the president's big, beautiful bill, including the tax plan. I understand that he campaigned in part on no taxes on overtime, no taxes on tips. The proposal that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the proposal as it's coming out of the House is likely to have no tax on overtime at all, but on tips, it depends on what industry you're in and what your income is. Is that correct?
To some extent, yeah. And then there's a giant question. The actual legislative language refers to, quote, cash tips, and we haven't been able to get confirmation on, does that literally mean cash? If actual cash, or would that count, when you tip your Uber driver via your phone? We haven't been able to figure that out
So
yet.
is there any, I'm embarrassed to say I didn't think about this during the political campaigns. I was so focused on the politics. If I remember correctly, Kamala Harris also said she wasn't going to tax tips. Is there any good policy basis for not taxing overtime or not taxing tips?
Well, there's really good electoral reasons for doing it.
Political, not political policy.
Not particularly. And actually, it's interesting. Two things. One, the bill is specifically on income tax, not on payroll tax. So you'd still be paying payroll. If you're one of these people, you'd pay payroll tax. Most people who are tipped employees in the United States already aren't paying federal income tax because they're below the threshold. So this really only applies to maybe a quarter of tipped workers in the U.S. And also, as somebody who waited tables, granted in a past generation, but in Alston and Harvard Square, you didn't really ever pay full taxes anyway.
Yeah. So some of these things I realize that Republicans want to do and Trump wants to do aren't going to take effect for several years. So
that's what Chuck Todd was telling us.
Yeah, so that's kind of, some of the
although the taxes could. If this tax bill gets paid, those taxes will.
Well, they'll continue, that's right. But
but they'll continue with an expiration date so that they can minimize the cost estimates so that they can mess with the deficit a little bit more
Which is what they did in 2017, which candidly is one of the reasons why they're having to deal with it again now.
But some of the things like the clean energy stuff, credits for producing renewable energy start shrinking in 2029 and 2031. That's kind of hopeful that maybe some of the clean energy stuff can get done before then. And some of the Medicaid cuts are not going to take place for a while either. So, if you don't want to cut Medicaid, that's kind of encouraging.
It is. It's interesting. This kind of ties into the thing at the beginning, right? Which is, this isn't quite press release, but it's headline, right? We've cut X billion dollars off the deficit over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Well, most of these people aren't going to be in Congress. Trump's certainly not going to be in the White House in 10 years. So there is a bit of can kicking here, but you get to feel good about it in the short term.
Well, you know something we don't know when you said he won't be there in 10 years. So go ahead.
What about Massachusetts? We've been talking all week long about the, eds and meds economy, and Harvard could be a shell of its former self, and Mass General and the Harvard hospitals, et cetera. What do you see for us here?
It's not good. Harvard obviously is its own situation, but it's not the only research university in Massachusetts. It's the one that's getting hit hardest because Trump has a particular animus toward them. It's a real problem. Massachusetts is one of those states that historically provides more money to D.C. than it takes back from D.C., just the way it is. We're a rich state. No, it's an enormous problem. I will say, there's huge questions still how any of this is going to happen in the courts. But in the interim, stuff has ground to a halt. We had a story today about Harvard Medical School basically saying all the grants are basically effectively stopped. We don't know, for example, what that means for clinical human trials, right? A lot of Harvard Med research is on people for cancer or diabetes or whatever. It's a nightmare for a state like Massachusetts, but I think, and New York and Pennsylvania, that's a little part of the plan here. These are not Trump states.
Yeah, well, that's one of the theories, right, that Nancy Gertner talked about, the retired federal judge, that he's picking on blue states as opposed to red states.
Well, picking on, but also blue states with this White House have basically no political power, right? It doesn't matter how much Ed Markey and Elizabeth Warren scream at the White House isn't listening to them.
So we've talked with a lot of people, including Sarah Fortune, the doctor who ran the TB lab at the T.H. Chan School of Public Health, who lost the $60 million tuberculosis grant a couple of days ago. And John Gruber, from head of economics at MIT, a lot of people in the university infrastructure, the president of Mount Holyoke, the president of Wesleyan. A lot of this research stuff is on its way to Western Europe and China now. And virtually everybody with whom we've spoken have said, for those of you who are laboring under the misconception that when, in quotes, the Democrats win back the House or when they win back the presidency in 4 years, they'll just reverse it. It's not that easy, is it?
It's not. It's very easy. This is true for the economy, too. It's very easy to stop something or break something. You can do that instantaneously. It takes a lot longer for stuff to restart. And that's true for supply chains. That's true for economics. That's true for research. It absolutely is. It's interesting. I'm just reading, and I'm late to it. I'm reading the Walter Isaacson book called The Code Breaker, which is about CRISPR and gene editing, et cetera. Yeah. And what's fascinating about the beginning of it is just kind of the very basic research that was happening at Stanford, which ultimately leads to this, which wasn't a grant to create gene editing. It was a grant for something else, but they kind of started developing this, and it's become this massive multi-billion-dollar industry, which Massachusetts, lots of states benefit from, and lots of humans are benefiting from. But you get rid of that basic R&D, the downstream consequences. Again, the internet is basic R&D that the government funded.
Yeah.
By the way, on a related note, Jamie just shared with us in the New York Times breaking news, 5 House Republicans voted against their own party's major domestic policy bill in the Budget Committee, blocking the bill to deliver Trump's domestic agenda from the floor. However, this is where they're coming from. They want deeper budget cuts, and Republican leaders will have to scramble to find changes that can placate them and more centrist members of the Congress. So I guess this is not quite a done deal in the House of Representatives.
And the House of Representatives, they've got a very, very narrow majority, and they've got a bunch of people on the hard right who want very, very deep cuts. It's true on the Senate side, too. Rand Paul will not vote for this current bill. There's some other Republicans who wouldn't.
Yeah, although I also wonder when you have somebody like Josh Hawley complaining about cuts to Medicaid, he's not exactly, a left-winger, and I think a lot of those senators from states where a lot of people are on Medicaid, if they get rid of the Obama expansions of Obamacare, then we're talking millions of people losing their health insurance.
I mean, this was always the risk of the so-called big, beautiful bill, right? And deciding to try to do everything in one piece of legislation instead of, not even piecemeal, but, giant, just do taxes, just do this. He's not. I think the bet from the White House is that the Republicans who've complained about this have complained about similar things in the past and ultimately have fallen into line.
So, Dan Primack, I know we can't always know what's going to happen, but, you must have a lot of great sources you talk to for your stories all the time. Is there a consensus? I mean, do people have, are we going to be here like in 2 years or what? I mean,
everybody at the BPL, it's going to be crowded.
Yeah, we could be living right here.
Because they're not going to have jobs,
yeah.
exactly.
But there is this, Globe had a front page story today about these kids coming out of college. They're basket cases because they don't know, a lot of them want to do research jobs. Where are they going to, the people that work biology and all that kind of stuff. What's the thinking in the
economically, I think ultimately we'll be okay. What's interesting is the underlying economy of the United States is really good right now. It's been good for several years. Obviously, inflation's a problem, but that's been coming down. Almost everything that's happened in the past 2 months is self-inflicted, and you have seen the White House back off a lot of it. I think, if you're going to think of what's going to happen in 5 years, 10 years to kids coming out of college, AI is probably a much bigger issue, and it's a relatively non-political issue. I think it's kind of the thing that people are paying maybe too much attention to in the short term and not nearly enough in the long term.
You know who's obsessed with AI?
Say what?
You know who is obsessed with AI?
Who?
Pope Leo XIV. That was a big deal with Pope Leo.
That's right. Somebody else is going to write all his encyclicals now and take a burden off his shoulders. But what do you mean, though? In 5 or 10 years, where will AI be?
AI, I think, is going to be replacing just an enormous amount of the workforce. A huge amount of the white-collar workforce, and a lot of the blue-collar workforce, too, as robotics gets better. You see the things it is able to do already and how... And AI has been around for 30 years, but the advancements in the last couple of years, and if you assume the advancements continue at pace, it's really extraordinary. There's just an enormous amount of work that is not going to be done or needed by humans anymore. And maybe this will be like past tech transfers. The example people always give is the tractor. Well, the tractor showed up, and suddenly you didn't need as many people in the fields anymore, but we created other jobs that replaced them because that saved time. It's unclear if AI is going to work the same way.
So how's your anxiety level after talking to Dan Primack for 20 minutes?
Well, I'm very anxious all the time these days. I mean, I'm very anxious. I'm very anxious all the time. And I also think that the idea that Americans, because we don't have the greatest educational system anymore in public schools in the United States, are Americans going to be, if those jobs are in AI, are Americans going to be able to take them? I mean, this idea of these manufacturing jobs coming back here, I think is kind of baloney because it takes them too long to build, and they're going to be robotics in the places that do the manufacturing.
I generally agree with that. I mean, we are right now still leading in AI, but that's on the tech side. The bigger question is all the other jobs it's going to replace. I think we're going to be fine. If you're somebody who's a good AI engineer, I think you're going to have a nice career in the U.S., but then again, 5 years ago, I would have said if you're a good coder, you're going to, and you're 25 and you're a good coder, you've got the next 50 years set. A lot of those jobs are already gone.
Yeah, no, that's very true. You got to diversify the coding business too.
Yeah.
All right, Dan Primack, it's great to talk to you.
Great to see you, Dan Primack.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. We have been.
How do we get subscribed to your deal, by the way?
Axios.com/newsletters.
Axios.com/newsletters.
I love Axios. I love the national Axios. I love the local
great.
Axios. I mean, all your different versions of Axios. It's great.
Great.
Get it in my mailbox every morning.
Good to see you, Dan.
Thank you, Dan Primack.
Thank you.
He's business editor at Axios and author of the daily Axios Pro. Did you say it Pro Rata?
Rata.
Rata. Thank you. Pro Rata newsletter. Okay, thank you, Dan. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to talk about PBS American Experience's latest Mr. Polaroid, the genius Edward Land behind Polaroid. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
25 years after the premiere of the hugely popular film Final Destination, the franchise is back for a 6th installment. And the makers of the movie say it's going to be more gory and terrifying than ever.
The death that comes for you in Final Destination is really death by filmmaking.
I'm Elsa Chang. More from the team behind Final Destination Bloodlines on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, announcing the 2025 season of Tanglewood, showcasing the beauty of incredible surroundings and world-class music. Tanglewood, where music goes for the summer. Tanglewood.org. And Boston Ballet, presenting Spring Experience, a program that showcases the range and beauty of ballet today, featuring works by Mikko Niisanen and Jiri Killian, now through May 25th at Citizens Opera House. Tickets at bostonballet.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. The Attorney General joins us here at the library for an hour on May 21st. Mayor Wu joins us at the library for an hour on May 28th. Before the Polaroid land camera came on the scene in the late 40s, taking family portraits or developing film of any sort was a whole ordeal. Setting up complicated cameras, going through a lab where a trained professional would process it. The instant developing film and camera, pioneered in Cambridge, opened up an entirely new world of expression and became a cultural phenomenon. Outcast, even though we will explain the shake in it for the younger part of the audience in a few minutes. We're here to talk about Edwin Land, Mr. Polaroid himself, as highlighted in a terrific new American Experience film. We're joined now by American Experience executive producer Cameo George and writer-director Gene Tempest behind the new documentary, Mr. Polaroid. It airs Monday the 19th, 9 p.m. Eastern on GBH Channel 2, pbs.org/American Experience. And the PBS app. Gene, Cameo, welcome and congratulations. It's really great. It's really great.
Well, let's start with you, Cameo. Tell us, I mean, I think a lot of people have heard of Polaroid, but they may not know about Edwin Land. Tell us.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things that was so interesting about this film and the idea behind making this film is that the camera itself is iconic. Yeah. Doesn't matter how old you are, even if you are Gen Z now, you know, Gen Alpha, you know what a Polaroid camera is. And I think that for decades, so many of us never thought about who made the camera, how the camera came to be, and how much of an impact and how revolutionary the camera was. So having this opportunity to learn about Edwin Land, the man behind the camera, felt like an opportunity that we just didn't want to pass up.
And Gene, I assume this is real. I'd heard this and I thought it was apocryphal, but it turns out, I guess it's true, that the concept for this came in a near accident that young Edwin Land was involved in as a teenager or something. What's that story?
You know, this guy, and he is such a presence in Boston. You know, as you guys know, I feel like once you start looking into Edwin Land, you're sort of walking in his shadow around Cambridge, Boston, Waltham, all these places. But he does have these kind of two flash of insight, eureka moments that lead to this revolutionary tech. And when he first gets started, he's barely a teenager, and he gets in a near accident on a country road in Connecticut. And it leads him to developing, some of the first thin, mass-produced polarized sheets that really are designed to change the way that you drive at night and to make roads a lot safer for ordinary Americans. And then from there,
to deal with the headlight, we should say to deal with the headlight glare. Is that not correct?
Yeah, the glare.
Yeah. Exactly right. Yep, exactly right.
And what's the other one you were going to say? That was the pivotal moment.
The other one is kind of, it's a little bit more of an intimate moment, but he's on vacation with his family. And, his daughter actually asks him if she can see a photograph that he's taken. And he's taken it with this long process, this arduous process that you've just described. And he has to explain to her that, she can't see it right away. And it makes him wonder, why not? And that leads to the development of this iconic piece of tech.
Yeah. I love that. And just if anybody doesn't remember, you could take the picture and it would just come out of the camera and you'd stand there and you'd watch it develop magically like you used to have to watch it before that in a dark room developing magically. Sure you had one when you were a kid.
I did indeed.
When I was a little kid. That was the big thing, to go to the party with your Polaroid camera and take pictures of everybody. But I also read where Cameo, he was doing huge business. Well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, let's go back to the first camera.
Let's go back to the first camera. You're right, before we get to World War II. Tell us about the first camera.
At the department store here, downtown Crossing, one in New York City. Tell what that moment was like when the press finally saw this magic for the first time.
Yeah, so I'll tell you about the department store, but before the department store, when the press actually gets a look at it, Land attends a tech conference in 1947. Gene, correct me if I'm wrong with the date. And he has all of these reporters and all of these technical people and people who are interested in the latest tech gathered together. And he comes on stage with this new contraption, and he has his portrait taken, and then within minutes, the Polaroid that we're used to pops out of the bottom of the camera, and particularly the press photographers in the room are aghast because they are the experts, and they know how long it normally takes to get this photo. And so they all rush the stage and are so interested in this technology. And there's a funny story in our film that Christopher Bonanos from New York Magazine tells, where the New York Times reporter is all the way at the back of the room. And so he misses the amazing display, and he's like, do it again.
That was great.
For himself. And this incredible moment ends up across the country on front pages of newspapers everywhere. So fast forward a year later, and in 1948, as you're asking, in Jordan Marsh department store, it's the first time that the public itself gets to get their hands on this incredible camera.
And in current dollars, $1,600 as opposed to the Swinger that exploded at $19.99 or whatever it was in the early 70s. Gene, I learned I thought I knew a decent amount. I live in Cambridge because of the Cambridge Connection, drive by Memorial Drive in the old building. Repeatedly, Marjorie wrote columns when she was at the Herald about the end of Polaroid, which was not so happy for either the company or the workers. But I thought I knew a lot about him. One of the many things I learned from your film, about which I knew nothing, was how committed he was to having women in positions of power. Tell us about a few of these people, including, since my daughter went to Smith and she went to Smith, about the Smith young woman.
And it's not just singular. It's a whole cohort and almost generations of young women from Smith. And it was one of the most surprising things, I think, when we had the opportunity to take on this story. And we're piggybacking off some great research that's been done by several authors. But Land was very unusual in that he did open up opportunities for women to be in the labs, doing research, leading research divisions. Many of them came right out of Smith. Many of them had one art historian professor who would sort of steer them towards Polaroid if they seemed especially interested in photography. But they arrived starting in the 40s, most of them without any chemistry, without any optics backgrounds, and really learned on the job. And we're able to profile two. One, Eudoxia Mueller, who's really at 24, the first person in the world to ever see a Polaroid instant image. She makes it happen. And then another remarkable woman, Roy Morris, who, for several decades leads the black and white division and really makes some unbelievably beautiful film.
Was he a feminist or ahead of his time, or did he just go where the talent was?
It's up for debate. That's such an interesting question. It was very unusual. We know he's an iconoclast across, he's not just interested in revolutionary cameras, he's interested in the revolutionary workforce. But it's also possibly a shrewd decision because it's an untapped, brilliant labor force. A very well-educated, often fabulous artists as well. So they were bringing both those sides.
Well, that was one of the things, Cameo, that you read, or that I learned from the film too, is that people compared him to Steve Jobs. That the idea of part of this is how beautiful everything looks, and I'm an Apple person. I like the way my computer looks much better than the Dell computer I have here at the office, I must say. It's much more gorgeous, and the Apple products are beautiful. So tell us about that angle of his interests.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to say that instead of people comparing him to Steve Jobs, I'm going to say people compared Steve Jobs to him.
Okay, that's a good point.
And he was the inspiration. He's one of these early CEOs and technologists and visionaries who thinks as much about the aesthetics as he does about the technology. The comparison is also apt because not only is he obsessed with every detail of how it looks and shape and form, but he infuses a certain kind of mentality throughout the corporate structure of his company, of the Polaroid business. And so what Jean was talking about with the women from Smith, this idea that you just want the best people. It doesn't matter who they are. You just want the best people for the job. You don't have this tunnel vision and think that the only people who can do this job are mechanical engineers or STEM guys. You're thinking, I want someone who appreciates the beauty in things, who wants to look at a problem from a different perspective. And so it's not just the way that he thought about how things looked in the technology, but it's really that mentality of just wanting the best from people and that singular focus that some say is monomaniacal. And, in some ways there's ego and there's a darkness to it. But on the very positive side, it's just this real focus and desire to create something new. And one of the lines that's in the film, to create something that people don't even know that they want to need, right? It's incredible.
That's the voice of Cameo George, Cameo, and Jean Tempest, who's also with us, two of the leaders behind the great new documentary, Mr. Polaroid, about Edwin Land and Polaroid. Obviously, it airs Monday the 19th, next Monday, 9 p.m. Eastern on GBH2 and associated kinds of things. Can we add to the list, Jean, of things that I knew absolutely nothing about? Here's filmmaker Parker Sargent describing the subversive freedom of Polaroid for queer people in a dangerous point in our history. Here.
Through the mid-20th century, being queer is a secret. Being queer is also a crime. So when I look at Polaroid photos of queer people in the 1950s, you see true joy, you see true love. Inevitably, they wanted that joy that they felt in photographs to exist at all times. And just to not be held down anymore.
Yeah, this is one of the moments in your film where you realize as much fun as the Polaroid was early on and well beyond early on, the cultural significance of this thing was huge. Talk a little bit about that soundbite.
It's one of my favorite moments in the film, and I think it's one of the emotional beating hearts of the entire story is, I think we have the opportunity to take on these biographies sometimes and to look at, what happens when an inventor is tinkering with something. But what's really interesting to me is what happens once that invention leaves the doors of the factory and of the lab. And, in this case, to have the opportunity to look back at the power of the image and to look back at the place of, of photography and its importance in the way that we document our lives and who has the opportunity to create images, to hold images, to have the exact images that they wish to have of themselves and of their families. I think it's hard to overplay how important it is.
Well, the privacy aspect, right? You didn't have to go to CVS or whatever was around then with your film and have somebody possibly looking at it and objecting to it, so you could do it in the privacy of your own home. There was
also at a time, as the film says, when being gay or lesbian was illegal.
Exactly. So maybe you didn't want to have those pictures seen by some anti-gay person in the there was no CBS then, but the equivalent, you know what I'm talking about. But we also talk about freedom for Black Americans. Derek Thompson is quoted, this art historian, talking about Black Americans being able to express themselves in the segregated South thanks to Polaroid.
In the American South at the time of segregation, in Jim Crow, a lab technician might be white and not believe that certain images of Black people should be seen. But with Polaroid, you have the opportunity through the camera to document your lives.
You know, Jim was talking about before, you know, that things didn't end that well for Polaroid. We just got a text from Sharon who's saying, when you talk about Polaroid, don't forget to mention that after Dr. Land died, the venture capitalists who bought the company raided the pension fund, so all the workers lost their pensions. It was a real bad ending to the story. And years ago, when I was working at the Boston Herald, I interviewed a lot of people who lost their jobs there, but some of the people talked about this guy, Walter McKay, who'd been there for 38 years. No, he'd been there for, Alan McCarthy had been there for 38 years, talked about it was a wonderful place to work, an absolutely place to work. This other guy, Roger Campbell, had been there 20 years, talked about Land as a gentleman among gentlemen, and on and on. These workers said absolutely wonderful things about Dr. Land, but then they point out that when the company was sold, that retirees and ex-employees were left without anything, any health insurance or pensions. And this one woman talked about how she was a single mother with cancer and she had to spend $12,000, last year for health care. And this was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, actually, and all that kind of stuff. So what happened? You know, it was like the greatest company ever. All these people went on and on and on, how great it was. And they expected to have these pensions, and then they didn't. So, Cameo, what happened?
Well, I can't speak to the pensions and the end of the company and the contemporary aspect of the story, but we do explore towards the end of the film really the turning point, and I think the beginning of the end for the company. We've spoken about Land's singular focus and his sort of, his ego, but also his just the driven nature. And one of the episodes that really illustrates that is the fight, the legal battle that he has with the Kodak company.
Yeah.
In the beginning, Polaroid and Kodak they had this very symbiotic relationship. Kodak supplied the film. They were the leading photographic film purveyor in the country, if not the world. And Land depended on Kodak for their film. Some years into the tremendous success of the Polaroid camera and Polaroid sales, Kodak decides to develop their own instant camera, and that is the beginning of the break. There ends up being this massive, massive copyright battle between the two companies that literally takes years. And people that Gene and Amanda, the other producer, talked to, they spoke about how Land could not focus on anything but the legal battle. He was in the courtroom every day. It was all consuming. And he stopped innovating and stopped running the company in a sense. And even though in the end, Kodak won the legal fight, it's really a Pyrrhic victory because they win on paper, but in the end, the company dissolves. And so I think that, I'm not surprised to hear the bittersweet emotions of the people who worked at the company because, again, their experience working for the company was incredible, but that really unceremonious end was devastating.
I also want to say one of the things I really liked in your film, not only did I learn a lot about a local icon and this brilliant scientist, but you don't ignore the underside too. Well, on the same side, we don't have time for this now, but while he's hiring black workers, some of his black workers find out that he's also helping South Africa and that regime to manufacture ID cards. And ultimately, thanks to the activism of people like Caroline Hunter and other people you have in your film, he backs off. But it's not a story that's all, lightness and glory, but there's an underside too. For I assume both of you, I know Gene said this, I assume Cameo, it applies to you too, that you learn things. Starting with you, Gene, what was your takeaway from your research and the final product of your work about land and about the impact of the Polaroid in our culture?
I think I'll always be surprised by sort of the boundless creativity with which people will use technology in unexpected ways, for good, like we've been talking about, and also for bad. I mean, this was a very creative use in South Africa that led to a lot of suffering, but certainly an application we wouldn't necessarily have expected. So I think, the biggest surprises were just about, it's in some ways about the limits of technology and the power of people, I guess I would say. And again, just having a chance to look through this archive was a real privilege.
It's a great privilege to watch it too. How about you, Cameo? What did you take away from your collaborative work on land and Polaroid?
Yeah, for me, I was endlessly fascinated, as we've discussed, by his vision of the workforce that he needed to achieve his goals. The fact that he was hiring these women in the time that he was doing, hiring African American employees immediately after the assassination of Dr. King. I think that was incredible. Yeah. But also just the fact that he envisioned everyone having a camera in their pocket 5 decades ago is mind-boggling.
Can I say, I have a personal experience, and this is not mentioned in your film, but it's the local angle on this. A year or so ago, the spectacularly talented Elsa Dorfman died. And there's a wonderful film called The B-Side, made by Errol Morris, a Academy Award-winning documentarian, also from Cambridge, about Elsa. And I don't know if either of you have ever seen the life-size Polaroid cameras. Elsa had one of the few, and I am lucky enough to have on my wall family pictures taken on Polaroids from life-size cameras, where literally Elsa would take the picture and then, just like a little tiny Polaroid, would pull the film out of this massive thing, and all of a sudden what appears
and
is
they're all
image.
over the place.
They're just
in
beautiful.
homes in Boston and Cambridge and all around here. You see
really
family
beautiful.
pictures taken by her.
They're great.
Yeah.
Let me say, your film really, Marjorie and I said this to each other in anticipation, how great it was, and congratulations to both of you, and we hope everybody watches it Monday night. And thanks for your time today, both of you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great. It's a great film. It's Monday. That's May 19th, Monday, 9 o'clock at night on GBH Channel 2. Also on PBS.org, American Experience, and the PBS app. We've been speaking with American Experience executive producer Cameo George and writer-director Gene Tempest behind the new documentary, Mr. Polaroid. Again, it airs Monday, May 19th, 9 p.m. Eastern on GBH Channel 2, PBS.org, American Experience, and PBS app. Thank you very much for coming in. After a quick break, we're going to talk to a Bunker Hill Community College student and viral TikTok painter. His name is Armani Thomas, and he paints scenes all around Boston, even right here at the Boston Public Library. He's listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, the former librarian of the nation's largest library, says book banning threatens the flow of free ideas and information. Carla Hayden, the 14th Librarian of Congress, shares her thoughts on the dangers of book banning, part of our ongoing series, Unbound Pages. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Atlantic Design Center by Eldridge Lumber and Hardware, committed to helping you achieve your vision for a new kitchen or bathroom and guiding you from design to completion with showrooms in York and Portland, Maine. AtlanticDesignCTR.com. And MIT Sloan Executive Education. You can equip yourself with the skills to lead in a rapidly changing world. Courses cover AI, leadership, and data-driven strategy. More at executive.mit.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. Usually there's time for two more things, but today we decided instead to do two more paintings, well, actually more than two more paintings, and some time with a remarkable young painter, musician, creative type, Armani Thomas, Currently a student, as Marjorie said, at Bunker Hill Community College studying studio arts. He's got a small city painting, as in city painting series, painting T stations, particularly the Orange Line, and buildings around Boston. It leaves him on location for anyone to grab for free. You find him on TikTok. Where do they find you on TikTok, Armani?
My name is Armani Thomas, but on TikTok, I am Armani Thomas.
M-O-N-E-Y, exactly.
Yes,
welcome to the show, Armani. It's great to see you.
So elaborate.
Let me hold this up, by the way.
There's
Can you hold?
Studio
get a shot
here,
of this?
right? Can you get it?
What is
there
this?
There it is.
A little
That's
closer.
the Boston Public Library studio.
When did you do this?
Somebody from the staff, Nicole, asked me to do it, and she asked me to do the outside and the inside. Well, she didn't ask me to. She asked me to do either or, and I was like, I gotta go for broke and do both. So I did that a day before I was supposed to be here, as procrastination goes.
So tell people what you do. So you did that at the Boston Public Library, but you're taking you're painting all over Boston. Like where?
Anything that's interesting to me. So I study a little bit of architecture as well. That's where I'm trying to shift my focus once I transfer out of Bunker Hill. So anything that's interesting to me. I've taken the Orange Line my entire life. I don't have a car.
So you're from Boston?
Yeah,
okay.
Born and raised. So just trying to highlight things that people might be taking for granted about the city, you know what I mean? Because I feel like, especially people around my age, always trying to get out of Boston. They think they've seen it all, you know.
How old are you?
I'm 24.
So how'd you learn to paint?
I've always been painting. I've been drawing since, they gave me crayons and I was, on the walls. I was fortunate enough to work at Artists for Humanity.
Oh, that's a great spot.
Yes. So, a bit of classical training as well, and in my studies at Bunker Hill.
People don't know there's artwork all over the Artists for Humanity, all over the walls.
Place.
Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
You said to one of our coworkers, maybe the one you were talking to about doing something of us, it's a good time to be an artist in Boston. Why is it a good time?
I think that right now, artists in Boston are realizing that the ball's in their court, and that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, and we are really coming together. I'm seeing a lot of artists on the musical side, visual side, performance side, realizing that the city supports them, leaning into that, but also putting their own voice on it as well, realizing that they don't necessarily have to represent Boston in their art. They themselves are a representation of it as well.
Your stuff is free. We love free, by the way.
Who doesn't?
Doesn't that screw?
Yeah, we're ready to buy
yourself?
it. We want to buy it. And you are money.
Why'd you decide to make your work free at this stage of your career?
So I'm a graphic designer as well, and that work always gets muddy once you start to put a price on things. Okay. Most of my design work, I have a conversation up until like a deadline, and they're like, so how much do I owe you? And I'm like, I don't even want to think about that. So putting this up for free, eliminates that, and also, honestly, it's more personal than
Marjorie, you were inspired. By the way, Marjorie decides she's not going to take a salary for the next couple of months.
That's right.
In the spirit of our money time. Wait, you said it was. You said it's a personal thing?
Yeah, it's a personal thing.
What does that mean? Do you mind telling us? Or no? If you're uncomfortable, you don't have to.
No. There's art that should be paid for, because art is a laborious thing at times. Most of the time, this thing doesn't paint itself. But in terms of art that I feel is like necessary to kind of just get out of me, I can't put a price on that. You know what I mean? And putting these up around the city, I have a little one right here. I don't even. Yeah. Hello.
Can we get close on that?
Oh,
I love that. I've seen that. That is great.
Look at that.
I love it.
Thank you.
By the way, you're going to find him on TikTok at ARMONEY, even though he doesn't charge. ARMONEY Thomas on TikTok. You are really a talented guy. It's a pleasure
Armani
to have
Thomas
you.
on Instagram.
Armani Thomas on Instagram. Great to see you, Armani Thomas. Great.
Thank you so much. You are so talented. You're going to have a great career. Armani Thomas, local guy, doing these miniature masterpieces all around Boston. As Jim said, you can find him at TikTok at Armani. That's MONEY, Armani Thomas. All right. Coming up after the 1 o'clock news, Judge Nancy Gertner is going to tell us about Trump's legal cases. You're listening to Boston Public Radio live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Our recent membership drive was a success. Your support is so appreciated. Today's news is on the air because you helped us get it there, and we know we all need to stay informed more than ever. So thank you from all of us at GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Liberty Mutual Insurance. Liberty believes progress happens when people feel secure and exists to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow. Learn more at libertymutual.com. And Gentle Giant Moving and Storage Company, employing athletes since 1980 and currently hiring to join their team. Gentle Giant is an equal opportunity employer. More at gentlegiant.com/careers.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head on the third hour of BPR. We're live at the library. We'll check in with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner on the crisis for the rule of law in America. We'll get her reactions to yesterday's Supreme Court oral arguments on birthright citizenship and nationwide injunctions, and what the courts can and should do to stand up to Trump's unconstitutional overreaches.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll end our week with you debating the elusive, up-to-interpretation 5-second rule after the team gave me grief for scooping back some fruit into a fruit cup instead of throwing it directly in the trash. When we're talking grapes, could it really be the 10-second rule? Help me get these food prudes off my back. Call or text in the third hour of Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump's domestic priorities, wrapped up in what he has called a big, beautiful bill, are stuck in the GOP-led House. Today, it failed to make it out of the Budget Committee, dampening supporters' hopes of getting the bill to the Senate by Memorial Day. President Trump's returning home with defense and economic agreements secured this week during his stops in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates. Doug Silliman is president of the Arab Gulf States Institute, a nonprofit think tank in Washington, D.C., weighing in on the significance of Trump's visit.
I think the real purpose of the trip was to show Americans that President Trump is able to deliver economically, particularly in light of all of the uncertainty that his tariff policy and other trade policies have created. And he tried to do this in the Gulf by getting large pledges for investment from the Gulf in the United States.
The Middle East was Trump's first major international trip of his second term. Russian and Ukrainian officials met today in Istanbul for their first direct peace talks in more than 3 years. The meeting, hosted by Turkey, took place a day later than planned and amid lowered expectations. Gökçe Sarakculo reports.
Ukraine has held firm on key demands, including full Russian withdrawal, while the Kremlin insists on keeping occupied territory. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, speaking later at a European summit in Albania, says a full, unconditional and honest ceasefire is urgently needed. But he criticized Russia for sending a lower-level delegation instead of President Vladimir Putin, saying it shows Moscow isn't serious about ending the war. For NPR News, I'm Gökçe Saraçoğlu in Istanbul.
There's no public transit train service in New Jersey today. The rail agency and a key labor union have failed to reach a new contract. Bruce Conviser reports the rail workers are now on strike.
More than 450 train engineers walked off the job, demanding a larger pay increase. The train engineers earn an average gross salary of $135,000 per year, according to New Jersey Transit, but union officials dispute that figure. Exactly how large of a pay increase the engineers want is unclear, but union leaders say that engineers at other regional rail services get at least $10 more per hour. Those rail companies, as well as New Jersey Transit bus service, are not affected by the strike. The two sides actually shook hands on a deal back in March, but the union membership voted it down overwhelmingly in April. New Jersey Transit officials are urging its customers to work from home if at all possible. For NPR News, I'm Bruce Conviser in New York.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up more than 200 points, or roughly 0.5%, at 42,545. This is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. The website of the Woods Hole Diversity Initiative has been removed from public view. The initiative, a long-standing collaboration among 6 science institutions, announced it was pausing activities earlier this year following the Trump administration pushback on DEI efforts. Its website contained information about its history as well as educational programs, events, resources, and related research. The website was hosted by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. In a statement to our sister station, CAI, the Institute says the contents of the website are archived and can be seen by member affiliates. And it's Game 6 tonight in the second-round playoff series between the Celtics and the New York Knicks. Boston trying to overcome some long ads to win the series. From the New England News Collaborative, Fausto Menard has a preview of tonight's game.
The Celtics are trying to become just the 14th NBA team in nearly 300 tries to win a playoff series after falling behind 3-1. They took the first step Wednesday night, defeating the Knicks in Boston. That win came after the Celtics lost All-Star Jason Tatum for the rest of the playoffs to a torn right Achilles tendon. Fellow All-Star Jaylen Brown says he still believes in this team.
I know it's easy to kind of write things off. Obviously unfortunate what happened at JT, but we still got basketball to be played. I believe in this group, so, don't count us out just yet.
If the C's win tonight, a deciding Game 7 will be played Monday in Boston. The winner of this series will play the Indiana Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals. For the New England News Collaborative, I'm Fausto Menard.
Don't look now, but the sun sets at 8 o'clock this evening. Yes, sir. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. Excuse me, Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan live from the Boston Public Library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Thank you. I have a little bit of a cold, so that's why I sound hoarse. The Attorney General is going to be here with us May 21st. That's Andrea Campbell. She'll take our questions and yours from 1 to 2. And Michelle Wu will be here with us on May 28th from noon to 1. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. Usually
Sorry.
don't worry, it's fine. I hope you feel okay?
I feel fine. I just sound horrible.
Okay, you don't sound horrible. Usually in this Friday 1 o'clock time slot, we have our media analysis segment, Press Play. But in light of everything going on with the courts in this country, we decided to postpone it a week, so it will return next Friday at 1 o'clock. Joining us now, though, on Zoom for On the Docket is retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. Judge Gertner is a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a BPR contributor. Judge Gertner, good to see you.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us, Judge Gertner. So I thought I was going to be hearing an argument all about birthright citizenship yesterday, but it was a lot about national injunctions. So what exactly did happen at the Supreme Court yesterday?
Never clear. I mean, the Supreme Court took the case on the question of the national injunction. Now, the reason why there was an injunction that was issued, and in order to issue an injunction, you have to predict the likelihood of success on the merits on the one hand and irreparable harm on the other. So when you're dealing with the appropriateness of a preliminary injunction, that is to say an injunction before all the evidence is in, they wound up dealing with, to some degree, both issues in a mush. So the issue of whether it's appropriate to have a nationwide injunction, particularly a nationwide preliminary injunction, was in play, and that raises interesting questions with birthright citizenship, right? If you don't have a nationwide injunction, you can be a citizen in New Jersey, but not in Louisiana.
Exactly. And
that's part of the argument was, a baby is born in Iowa and is a citizen and not in another country. So while there have been broad criticisms of nationwide injunctions, there's an interesting question about whether or not it made sense in this case. In other words, if they want to limit nationwide injunctions, limit it in a different kind of case than a case really that deals with, to some degree, such a central question, and also would be so difficult to implement even on a temporary basis. Having a nationwide injunction says things will continue as they have continued going forward. Where everyone's a citizen who's born in this country. If they change that, the chaos would be extraordinary. So there's at least an argument here that while the court doesn't like nationwide injunction, and while there have been criticisms of them, that they will say, they will try to come up with a limiting principle and say, this case, it may make sense, even if in other cases it does not, and kick the can down the road for another case. So that's what could be going on, and that's why the discussion was about how incredibly chaotic it would be. In the background was, well, maybe we won't need a nationwide injunction. I believe it was Justice Roberts that said that if we quickly dealt with this case. And if they quickly dealt with this case, in my view, the only outcome has to be leaving things as they are, because the 14th Amendment makes it clear that any person born in the United States is a citizen. And that was the innovation of the 14th Amendment.
Can we get back to the, I'm sorry.
No, go on.
Can we get back to the nationwide injunction thing? I have a bunch of questions. First of all, do you ever issue one?
No.
Okay. Were you ever tempted to issue one?
No.
Okay. So are there 93 districts?
Yes.
So it seems to me, and tell me if this is pathetically naive, that at worst, even with Elena Kagan, one of the liberals, apparently not being crazy about nationwide injunctions either, at least that was my takeaway from the oral argument, that they are going to split the baby, because regardless of what the case is, if it only applies to the one district in which the judge rules, then in theory, other than some sort of class action, which the government seemed to have a problem with too, there'd have to be 92 other cases to ensure that everybody in the country was treated the same way?
Right.
Okay.
I mean, but I also, part of the problem with nationwide injunctions is an issue that the Judicial Conference and Congress arguably can deal with, which is the problem of a nationwide injunction where the people are asking for it in a jurisdiction in which there's only one judge. In other words, that was part of it, which is that you go to a district in Texas where there's a judge that is that supports your side, and that he does a nationwide injunction. So the venue issue, which is where the case is brought, is part of the issues with nationwide injunctions, and people are trying to address that.
Well, that's what happened with mifepristone, right? They went to that guy, Kaczmarek, and that was a nationwide injunction from this one guy in...
but liberals did it too. Liberals went to a state where it was most favorable to them.
So that's right. So if you deal with venue, could that deal with nationwide injunction issues? And, there may be other ways in which a case in which a judge wants to issue a nationwide injunction could be a case on a quicker calendar than other cases. I mean, there are ways of dealing with this, but the core issue, particularly with birthright citizenship, is the implications of this decision are fundamentally nationwide. It's very difficult to break it down and to figure out how one would ever do it otherwise.
So on the issue of birthright citizenship, which I guess theoretically they don't have to reach, I don't know if that's true, you tell me if it is, they could just rule in the nationwide injunction thing. Was there any indication to you yesterday that there was not a strong majority for saying that the 14th Amendment means exactly what it says?
Hard to tell from the argument, because the argument was so taken up by the nationwide injunction issue. I mean, they certainly could, in this case, take cert on the question of birthright citizenship and accelerate the briefing of that and resolve that, and therefore duck the nationwide injunction issue for another case. They could certainly do that. There's no way of knowing from the argument yesterday.
Yeah. Well, they did hear Kavanaugh going on a lot about how it actually happened in the delivery room. You're going to have, is the baby going to have to produce, is the kid going to get a social security number? Is it going to be different in New Jersey than it is in Maryland? And all that kind of complicated stuff that you referred to at the beginning. It seems like it would be odd to be a citizen in one state and not in another. It would seem...
mifepristone is one thing. If it's stopped in one state and allowed in another, that doesn't pose the same issues as birthright citizenship. The abortion bans in one state versus another doesn't pose the same issue. But birthright citizenship, in one sense, is a core foundational issue, and I don't see how that can be enforced other than nationwide.
We're talking to Judge Nancy Gertner.
So, a federal judge is hearing arguments today. I don't know if there's been an update on that. I don't think so.
This afternoon.
But it's involving Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's the man that was, as the Trump administration admitted, mistakenly sent to a prison in El Salvador. The Supreme Court said that the president had to facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's coming back. He's not here yet. I still don't understand how this can just drag on like this when I know he's in a less gruesome prison, but he's still in prison far away from his family. And the president and his administration seems to be defying both this individual judge's order as well as the Supreme Court.
Well, add one thing before Judge Gertner responds. And the president, when he was interviewed by Terry Moran on ABC,
right. Yes, said he could do it.
I could get him. So I could, he didn't say I could facilitate, I could get him out of jail. So we're both in the same spot.
Yeah.
We don't understand why the judge is not coming down hard weeks ago on the government.
Well, this is, I think you've asked me this question so many times.
We have. I'm sorry.
I mean, no. What I'm saying is that the judges want to avoid the confrontation, but they're getting to the point, particularly in the Abrego Garcia case, where that confrontation may well be inevitable. My understanding is that the government wants to claim that there are state secrets involved. That is, and again, there are two issues on that. First of all, it is ridiculous. It is a ridiculous argument. The state secrets involved with respect to one person whom they said was mistakenly deported. So I don't, unless everything is a state secret or nothing is, and under these circumstances, I think that's one issue. I think that the judge is going to have to figure out when she's going to pull the plug finally.
Yeah.
And say that this is a violation of her order. Again, getting back to the state secret stuff, classified information is oftentimes in cases, issues with respect to foreign relations are in cases. There are ways of dealing with it. If you remember the Boston bomber case, Tsarnaev had classified information that was known to the government and the judge, but not to the defense. So we have ways of dealing it. Just because they allege state secrets doesn't mean that the doors are shut and the case can't proceed. So there is a point when she'll have to say, when the judge, in this case, Judge Zenas in Maryland, will have to say, enough is enough. Now, as I said, she will have to then address the representatives of the government in her courtroom who have seemed to be stonewalling, and and consider all the various tools the judge has with respect to contempt. But the bottom line is, this isn't about nuclear secrets. This is about a phone call. Does anyone in the United States in any way, contest the fact that if Trump got on the phone with Bukele, who's the head of El Salvador, and said, let this guy out, that he would get out?
Nobody, including Trump himself, by the way.
Judge Gertner, President Trump has declared a lot of national emergencies on things that don't seem to be national emergencies, kind of bogus national emergencies. But this is an emergency for this man and his family. I mean, he's in a prison. He's obviously not making an income. He's got children. One of them is disabled. This is an emergency for him. So that's the other thing. This has been going on for weeks and weeks.
It's interesting. We thought that we were a country that cared about individuals, about hostages. But I think that what Trump is relying on is the fact that he's demonized immigrants.
Yes.
And so he wants us not to care about Abrego Garcia or anyone else in that prison. The other thing, Marjorie, is that this is not just deportation.
No, it's not.
This man, particularly the prison he was initially sent to, no one gets out of that prison.
Yeah.
So this is deportation and then punishment. Deportation and life without parole. Now he's in a better prison. I don't know whether that's a prison that has, a meaningful release. But just because you're not a citizen or have illegally come into the country doesn't mean you are to be imprisoned or tortured or, that's a degree of punishment that is completely inconsistent with everything we stand for. So, it's not just this family, but frankly, the the whole discussion of sending American prisoners to
Libya. He was going to send them to Libya. Remember?
Right. I mean, we have a constitution, which Trump needs to know.
You know,
he doesn't.
Judge Gertner, this is another one we've said to you only 50 times, but it seems to me that because of the slowness of the courts, the Abrego Garcia, in my opinion, at least being another classic example, Trump has won every one of these cases. Even if Abrego Garcia is returned, even if Ozturk is allowed to stay in this country, even if Khalil gets out of the prison in Louisiana, the chilling impact on doing anything, saying anything, leaving your house, forget everything else, is so immense. So the good news is Ozturk got out of prison after a mere 7 weeks in a jail. The good news someday is Abrego Garcia gets released, comes home to his family after not knowing if he'd ever see his family again. So within the judiciary, is there not this sense that if we continue to operate on this snail-like pace, which you might not consider to be snail-like, but I think non-judges do, that they are essentially giving Trump what he wants regardless of outcome?
Oh, I don't call it. First of all, Jim, there have been 60 injunctions issued in which Trump has lost, and injunctions with respect to funding, with injunctions with respect to people's employment. I think Abrego Garcia has been unique in the sense that, I mean, and in those other injunction cases, there may be some question about compliance, but for the most part, I don't know about each one, the government has complied and even backed down from some of the positions they've taken. In the immigration space, they are playing brinksmanship. How far can I go before a judge drops the hammer on me? And that, and I appreciate the judge, the image of, Kash Patel in chains will not be a good one. And so that judge is sort of taking the case to the edge. But in terms of speed, from the moment he became president, these hearings have been expedited, preliminary injunctions have been issued to a degree that frankly surprised me. Abrego Garcia has been different. The alien enemies cases have been different. And I think in that area, Trump is relying on having demonized immigrants and undocumented people so that the public will not come up, will not rise up about that. And, sort of taking advantage of, this is a space in which the president has more authority, although not surely as much authority as he's claimed. So I don't think as a general rule, I've been astonished that the courts have held up and held up quickly.
Well, let's just narrowly, not to get in the thing, but in the immigration area, in the deportation area, that's not true, right?
Yes, that has not been true. And, frankly, immigration and deportation is the area in which the government has had, the case law has given the government, substantial power, not as much as power as they are taking, but surely substantial power. So that really is very different, I think, than the cases involving funding and employment and access to data. All of those cases, I think the courts have been remarkable no matter who appointed the judge.
We're talking to Judge Nancy Gertner.
Well, there's Georgetown Law School hosted Chief Justice John Roberts a little while back where he was talking about the rule of law as being endangered, which I thought was interesting since he's enabled Trump to do a lot of things with his immunity decision a while back. And then you have this conservative judge, Michael Luttig, who I've seen him on TV a bunch of times. He's talking about the end of the rule of law in America. He has a quote in his piece, which is in the Atlantic, when he says, "Thus far, Trump's presidency has been a reign of lawless aggression by a tyrannical wannabe king, a rampage of presidential lawlessness." And he's a conservative judge. So,
well, they're doing something together. Gertner and Luttig are engaged in a joint.
We did something. Yeah, we did something.
That's right. That's right.
We drafted a letter to Pam Bondi with respect to the arrest and sort of spectacle of the arrest of Judge Duggan in Wisconsin, and 160 judges signed on, and more are still coming. So, we have been working together. I mean, this is like the question people have asked, about are these all, the government has described this as activist judges and Clinton and Obama judges. They are not. He has now gone so far, and what he is trying to do is so far from lawful that you don't have to be a Clinton or Obama or retired judge to decry it. You only have to be alive. I mean, it's really not an issue. It has been so far from lawful.
So is the rule of law endangered then, or is it not?
Can I answer that one? Yes. I mean...
Yeah, I think so too.
I
think so too. I think that there is both what he's trying to do. I think Jim raised it before. So there's a question, a court will respond, there'll be an order, and I think for the most part he has obeyed them, except in the deportation space. That's one thing. And then there is the chilling effect of the things he's doing. When I got a call the other day from a naturalized citizen who said, can I afford to leave the country or will I be stopped at the border? Then you knew things had gone very, very far.
What'd you tell them?
I told her that there shouldn't be an issue. There shouldn't be an issue. But at the same token, people are talking about when they go in and out of the country, they should have a burner phone so that no one gets access.
Yeah.
I mean, the spillover impact is very dramatic. I was at a conference the past 3 days with some scientists who were saying that the Trump administration has prohibited 5 words from grant applications, and one word is mRNA. Now, mRNA is a kind of
a vaccine?
Well, no, it's not a vaccine. It's a mechanism by which the COVID vaccine was discovered.
Yeah.
And it's now being used, or scientists are trying to use that to deal with pancreatic cancer, to deal with other kinds of cancers. But Trump has that word as a barred word in these applications only because of its affiliation with the COVID vaccine. I mean, it is lunacy, but in that case, you're going beyond lunacy. Now you're going into real, meaningful impacts on real people. So,
and the irony, obviously, is that was one of the best things he did to get the vaccine to Americans in the world as fast as he did. Operation, what do they call it? Warp speed.
Warp speed.
Yeah,
Operation Warp Speed. But he's changed his mind, I guess.
Well, I mean, so scientists feel that if they're working on that in these extraordinarily promising areas of research, that somehow they won't get the grants that they need. And the grants that they need, I mean, this is the government, the federal government has in particular been remarkable in supporting basic research, and it's basic research on genes and on viruses and on a whole host of things that have in fact enabled applications down the line. And if we don't have the basic research, we won't have those applications down the line. And significant, if you don't have the basic research in the United States, other countries will step into the gap. So it's lunacy. It's just lunacy.
Okay, then. That would be Judge Nancy Gertner, our friend and legal analyst. Judge Gertner, as always, despite the content, it's wonderful to see you. Thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Judge Gertner.
Better.
Thank you.
You
We
later.
have been speaking with retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. She's a senior lecturer at Harvard Law School and a Boston Public Radio contributor. We're very grateful for her time. Okay, after a quick break, something that really doesn't matter very much, Jim. That's why
Does
I love
to me,
it. Okay,
actually.
does to you. The 5-second rule and you. Do you live by it or is it bunk science? The question is how long, if you drop some food on the floor, can it be in the floor before you decide not to eat it? The supposed limit is 5 seconds, but we'll find out if you think that's true and what is your strategy when you drop a piece of tenderloin steak on the ground right after you've cooked it. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
"25 years after the premiere of the hugely popular film Final Destination, the franchise is back for a 6th installment. And the makers of the movie say it's going to be more gory and terrifying than ever.
The death that comes for you in Final Destination is really death by filmmaking.
I'm Elsa Chang. More from the team behind Final Destination Bloodlines on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday. And Bay State Learning Center, a welcoming alternative to traditional schooling, committed to reimagining education as an adventure, where growth, purpose, and possibility lead the way. More at baystatelearning.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan and Jim Browdy live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. We just talked with Judge Gertner about the death of the rule of law in America. To end the show, we're asking you, does that also extend to the 5-second rule? Let me explain. This is a true story. Earlier this week, Marjorie was enjoying one of the fine fruit cups they serve at the Newsfeed Cafe.
I was.
When she knocked it over.
The whole thing.
Grapes, pineapples, blueberries, honeydew, the liquid in it, everything spilling on the carpet of our set up here. It happened. What she did next, however, I know I speak for our whole staff, made my jaw drop. Marjorie, who's an award-winning journalist, she's #2 on Boston Magazine's list of most influential Bostonians. She scooped the fruit back into the cup, was about to eat it as if nothing had happened. Thankfully, we caught her in the act, and she sheepishly backpedaled, exchanging the sullied fruit for a fresh cup. But the incident has us thinking about the 5-second rule. I should have explained it. If you drop something on the food on the floor and you pick it up within 5 seconds, you can eat it. So we want to know at 877-301-8970, call or text, are there any exceptions to the 5-second rule? Are there foods where the rule does not apply, meaning 1 second on the ground you don't eat it, or 15 seconds on the ground you do eat it? For example, bologna. If bologna falls on carpet, I would say there are no amount of seconds that make it acceptable to eat bologna. Or are you more of a Marjorie-free spirit? You just put it back in a cup and eat the whole damn thing. 877-301-8970. I did some research this morning.
Okay.
So do you know where the 5-second rule comes from? Allegedly, 2 sources in my research. This is true.
Okay.
Genghis Khan, founder of the Mongol Empire, allegedly Khan established the Khan rule at banquets. If food is dropped on the floor, it could stay there as long as he permitted and then could be eaten. That's one potential source. You know who the other source is?
I do not.
I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
She had something to do with GBH, and she is beyond iconic.
Julia Child.
Julia Child dropped a pancake on the floor during her show, and unfortunately, I couldn't find out what the end was. Knowing, well, I've met her twice, but I didn't really know her. Knowing Julia Child, wouldn't you think she'd pick it up and eat it? Would you not think that was the case? Even with syrup.
It would depend on which stage of cooked the pancake was. If it was a cooked pancake, you might. Otherwise, you couldn't really do it.
Well, if it's obviously the batter, I mean, I don't think she can even pick it up. How about if there's syrup on it? Would you pick it up then?
Syrup could be questionable.
877. This is the woman who's going to eat the fruit cup after it fell on the carpet.
I wiped off the grapes.
Okay, 877.
I like to live life on the edge.
301-8970. We want to know
Syrah.
if you adhere to the 5-second rule, what are your adaptions? Obviously, I think anybody who lives by the 5-second rule knows that it applies differently to different foods, and we want to know how you apply it in your life. We actually went to a party last night. Marjorie, me, Jamie, and Zoe went to the Boston Magazine 150 Most Influential thing, and a very celebrated person in town who shall remain unnamed dropped a lobster tail on the floor there. And as we're all watching, she or he shall remain unnamed. She put it back on the plate and she ate it.
She did.
Now you say
it was a lobster tail.
You say that's because it's on the shell. But the top side was not on the shell. The top side was just the meat.
Yeah.
And the lobster, right back on the plate, ate that baby.
Well, you know,
what'd you think of that?
Well, I think lobster tails are expensive.
She didn't pay for it.
I know. She could have gotten another one. She's like me. She lives on the edge, Jim.
Jim is my name.
I
Thank
called you Liz. Sorry.
Liz is your sister, by the way.
You are not Liz.
I'm not Liz.
Yep.
You call her Jim?
No, I don't call her Jim.
Okay, well then don't call me Liz.
Often. But I get why she did it. I think if you have a lobster tail, then you might make exceptions. I mean, like somebody just said, Matt and Cumberland, I'd pick up that piece of steak off my deck faster than Jim can cut off Marjorie when she's talking. How about that one?
Yeah, that is relatively rapidly.
But we have a lot of Weisenheimers who are saying, well, if that's such a great idea, then why is Marjorie sick today? I have a cold.
Well, you didn't eat it. You didn't eat the stuff because we stopped you.
And also mentioned, because we have a deal here with the Newsfeed Cafe, the second fruit cup was free. If I paid $5 for the fruit cup, I might have thought differently.
Well, I say free is in the eye of the beholder.
A lot of people rinse it off. They rinse off the stuff. You can't really.
Would you have eaten it if I hadn't stopped you?
I might have eaten a few of the grapes. Grapes look good. They look good.
Have you ever looked at the carpet up here, by the way?
It looks fine to me.
Yeah, it looks fine.
It's very nice. It's very nice. That's like people
who say...
growing
mushrooms, the carpet.
By the way, you know what I learned in this story?
No.
That the kitchen is much germier than the restroom in your home. So you're really taking your life in your hands by dropping something on the kitchen floor. The kitchen gets a lot more foot traffic and food debris. That comes to the people that don't wear shoes in their houses. Do you wear shoes in your house?
I do. I wear slippers.
Yeah, lots of people don't do that because they're bringing the germs from the outside. They think they'd be better off having house shoes. And
do you have house shoes?
I don't. I just traipse around in my dirty shoes and drop things on the floor.
And you eat them right away.
That's right. Okay. That's what I do.
That's great. Now that really is great.
877-381-8970. What do you think about this?
Can you do us a favor? Wait, can you Google and find out if she ate the pancake? If Julia Child ate the pancake, Jamie? Thanks. I'm sorry, Margaret.
I bet she did.
I would bet she did too, yeah.
I'll be very disappointed.
It's a wild woman.
If I find out otherwise. Julia from Arlington, what's your deal?
Hello, Julia.
Hi, this is Julia from Arlington.
Yeah.
I'm an OCD therapist.
Oh, great.
And I specialize in exposure therapy.
What does that mean?
On a
What is
daily
it? Whoa. What is exposure therapy?
So ultimately, it means that we are identifying the things in the environment that are triggering for people, and we're having them face their fears without doing rituals. So on a regular basis, I'm in Harvard Square, dropping food on the floor and eating it with my patients, and I'm happy to report that everyone is still alive.
There you go.
Wait a second. Are you making this up, or is this real?
As texters say, building up your immune system. That's what you're doing, Jim.
Wait.
Yeah, no, it's called exposure and response prevention, and it's a treatment that's designed for people that have obsessive compulsive disorder. So, people that have contamination fears. So a lot of the times we're just doing things that are going to elicit their anxiety so that they can learn how to better tolerate it, and they can also learn that eating things off the floor is generally safe.
So, by the way, you say you're the perfect first caller
Thank
for this.
you for calling,
No, don't
Julia.
go away. If you were here and you had dropped the fruit cup on the carpet, would you have eaten it?
Absolutely.
Oh, my God.
There you go. Thank you, Julia.
Julia, you are fabulous.
I
Thank
feel
you
much
for
better.
the first call. By the way, I was wrong. My apologies. Julia Child did not drop a pancake on the floor, says our coworker. Oh, this is not so bad. She actually dropped a potato pancake on the stovetop. This is great. She famously picked it up and said, "If you're alone in the kitchen, nobody will see." So there is the Julia Child story.
One of the textures says, it depends on the floor. If you're on the cheap platform at Porter Square, no way. My clean kitchen floor, 5-second rule.
By the way, what you said before is totally true. The lobster thing is a good example. You mentioned steak. Is there anything more heartbreaking? If you drop something that's really expensive, or even if it's not expensive, something you love and it's the last bite of the thing.
You're going to eat it.
You really do
I think
what
you
Julia
are.
Child does. You look around.
I think it depends on the cost of what you dropped. And as Woody, the UPS driver, says, it
What does he
depends
say?
on if anybody is watching.
Hear what Joel in Connecticut said?
Liverwurst, direct from the tube, has no time limit when dropped on the floor. That's what Jim
Exactly.
does.
That's my motto.
He has the liverwurst right out of the tube, which is pretty nauseating.
It's fabulous.
Tom from Framingham, thank you for calling.
Hello, Tom.
Hi, thank you for taking my call on this very important topic.
It is. Thank you.
I not only do I follow the 5-second rule to the letter, I actually, my rule is more like a 5-minute rule.
It's my kind of guy.
I've got all kinds of things on the floor, whether it's meatball sub, lasagna, a scoop of ice cream, a raw oyster.
Wow.
I have no hesitation in picking them up and eating. But if I could just tell a brief story real quick.
Please, yeah.
Years ago, I was on tour with my band, and we were playing this dive bar out in the Midwest somewhere. It was filthy. The floors were sticky with beer and who knows what else. And, of course, we were on tour. We didn't have any money. We couldn't waste anything. So I'm opening this big bag of pretzels, and the pretzels shoot out all over this floor.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't hesitate at all to just scoop them up and and gobble them up. So it's lucky I didn't get Hep C or all the hepatitises. But I live to tell the tale.
There you go.
By the way, are you still in a band, Tom?
I'm currently in 2 bands.
What are their names? If you want to promote them, feel free.
Oh, thank you. So one is MG Letterman.
Okay.
That is with the famous Mel Letterman, brilliant piano player and songwriter, from a number of other local bands.
What's the other one?
The other band is called the Smallest Town Ensemble.
Congratulations. We love your call. We love your experience, and good luck with the band. Appreciate it. 877-301-8970. Mike from Wilmington says, the answer to your question is, what would RFK Jr. do?
God. Oh, my God.
You do the opposite.
I don't know. We have a couple of great texts here.
Funny.
Seriously, says one texter, depends on what it is and what you know about the floor. If it's a gorgeous piece of steak, wipe it off and put it back in the grill for a minute. If it's a couple of grapes on a carrot stick, Marjorie, rinse it off and eat it. That's what I wanted to do. If it's a big spoonful of macaroni and cheese, call the dog. And apparently Mythbusters has looked into this.
And?
Dry foods like potato chips pick up fewer bacteria than moist foods like scrambled eggs. But sauce foods like meatballs actually leave sauce behind instead of transferring germs to what you retrieve.
Really?
So if you drop a big juicy meatball on the floor,
go for it.
You can pick it back up and shove it right in.
Mythbusters still on. That was a fabulous show.
I don't know.
My kids were young. It was
a
great.
Really good show.
Chris in Boston, welcome to the show. Thanks for calling. Hi.
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 How are you guys doing?
Hi.
Fine, thank you.
Okay. My take on this is that it's totally okay. I'm actually a doctor at Boston Medical Center. And I'm interested in infectious disease. And pretty much anything that would stick to your food, like germ-wise, like fungus, bacteria, would be destroyed by your the acid in your gut.
Really?
And the process of being digested. Yeah. With a few exceptions. If I'm in the hospital and I drop a sandwich, it's dead to me. Anything I drop in the hospital is dead to me.
Why?
I'm not eating anything off the floor. There's C. diff all over the place.
Oh.
Okay. But say I was on the sidewalk in Winchester, maybe. I might eat a sandwich off the sidewalk in Winchester.
That is unbelievable.
Okay, Chris, I think we're too afraid of germs. That's what I think. What do you think?
I think so too.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Wait.
I love germs.
You're a physician. You're in Winchester.
I am.
You drop a sandwich on the sidewalk
it's a nice
in
town.
Winchester.
Winchester's a very nice
and you
town.
pick it up and
no
eat the damn
allowed.
thing, Chris?
Yeah. Winchester specifically, not Fall River. Definitely not Fall River.
Oh, that hurts
Fall
Marjorie,
River.
Chris.
That's where I come from, Chris. I don't know if you
She
knew
knows that. Hey,
Okay.
Chris, thanks for the call.
Girl.
That was great. Thanks. And you do one very important facility.
Yes,
Boston
thank you,
Medical
Chris.
Center is fabulous.
Anonymous texter says, I actually just use the floor as my dinner table.
Read the next one from Eric from
I
Hopedale.
build up my kid's immune system by dropping all his food on the floor first. Well, that's one of the theories, for some childhood diseases that kids don't play enough in the dirt.
So we had a therapist who said she does, exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm.
She drops food on the floor to help her clients deal with this. And a physician from Boston Medical Center said as long as the sandwich is dropped in Winchester rather than Fall River, she'd eat the sandwich.
Yeah, we have a train to Fall River now.
We do. It doesn't run,
Doesn't
but
run
other than
as often
that.
as it should.
Yeah.
I think they're fixing that. I
They
can't wait
are.
till we have Phil Lang from the T.
He's on next month, isn't Phil Lang with us? Yeah, next
they
month.
waited
yeah.
30 years and they finally opened the train and
They didn't say it was going to work.
they have to have buses after about a few days. It was
That's okay,
terrible.
fine. You want to take a call or not?
Okay, let's go to Doc in Quincy. Hi, Doc.
Hello, Doc.
Hey, Jim and Marjorie.
Hey.
Doc Quincy. With all due respect to the Harvard Square floor eater, there is no reason to be eating food off the floor. That sounds like some Bobby Kennedy Jr. stuff. It's actually good to eat off of the floor. Absolutely not. It's disgusting.
And what is your experience, Doc? I mean, where does this come from? Is this like personal thing or what's your deal?
No, I've seen the floor. It's not something to be eaten off of.
Well, you heard the doctor say she's not going to eat it off either Fall River or the hospital at BMC, so she's discriminating too.
The floor is not a place to get your food. That's just stop eating food.
That's a deep. That is a very deep comment, Doc. Thank you from Quincy. We appreciate that.
Listen to this one. This is from Richard in Rhode Island.
What do you say?
I would take a lobster tail out of the trash and eat it as long as it was on top.
Can I tell you what happened to me the other day, which I swear to you I didn't think of
You took
till
a
a
lobster
second.
tail out of the trash?
No. It was garbage day in Cambridge. It was Thursday at my house. I totally forgot about this. And I wrapped up in pita bread and made this fabulous Swiss cheese sandwich with tomatoes, which I almost, because the tomatoes were so ripe, with Dijon mustard, which is my favorite. I forgot to tell you this. And I have garbage under one arm and my bag with food for work in the other. And when I went to the recycling bin, and the sandwich is wrapped in aluminum foil, I dropped the recycling in the recycling bin, and I dropped the sandwich in with it in aluminum foil. So it wasn't even on the ground. What do you think I did?
I would hope you took it out.
No, I didn't.
You didn't?
I felt it was like an environmental thing.
It was wrapped in aluminum foil?
Yeah.
First of all, you're not supposed to put aluminum foil in the recycling bin. You realize that?
I didn't mean to drop my sandwich in the recycling.
Did you take it out and put it in the garbage?
That was the whole point.
I know, but did you take it out and put it in the garbage?
No, once it was there, I think I can leave it.
You left it in the recycling bin?
No, I hired someone to get it out and put it in the garbage.
That's what you should do. You're not supposed to recycle aluminum foil.
It wasn't intentional, Marjorie.
No, that's a little weird, Jim. For somebody who eats off everybody else's plate.
That is weird.
I mean, just yesterday I had that nice piece of pumpkin bread. I tried
to
eat
fabulous.
it.
It was gone. Well, we split it, and then I ate my half, and then I ate your half. I didn't know that there was an arrangement to the contrary. By the way, I totally forgot about the aluminum. That is totally unlike me. It was a beautifully put together sandwich.
That is very neurotic.
And I was really looking forward to it. And I chose not to do it. It's upset. Yeah.
Okay.
In any case, so an anonymous texter says, "Hi, Liz or Jim, whatever your name is, and Marjorie. So if my sandwich fell into Marjorie's flower bed, don't eat it." That's the flower bed where the dog down the street pees, even though the owner says it doesn't.
You don't want that. I'm going to have to get a little fence. Another anonymous texter says, "It might be a fall-over thing, Marjorie. My mother once scooped up a Stouffer's turkey tetrazzini off the floor and served it to me on a school snow day."
Read the last line.
"And the food at McGoney's is best served on the floor."
That's not true. That is a joke. We love McGoney's.
They're building a new McGoney's.
Fabulous.
They're going to have a roof deck.
You don't have to eat on the floor at the new McGoney's, by the way. You can actually have an option to eat at the table.
I don't think there's going to be quinoa at every table either.
By the way, there was quinoa at every table. I mean, that is a really casual, relaxing place to eat. What do they have, a breathalyzer on the wall, too, before you go to your car?
Jeff from Newport, thank you for calling.
Hi, Jeff from Newport.
Oh, my God.
Hello, guys.
Hi, Jeff.
Did you used to work at McGoney's?
Yes, that's why I'm calling.
Oh! Take all the time you want,
I have a
Jeff.
hell of a story for you.
Go ahead, please.
So not only do I not have a 5-second rule, especially if I drop an egg nowadays, I am going after the egg. However, when I worked at McGoney's, I was a bartender there in that small bar where we had the keno and all that.
Oh, you bet you know my cousins.
We had a standing room reservation type thing on Saturday night. And there was a wonderful woman. She was a lawyer from Fall River, Mass. Very accomplished woman. And she was a little tipsy one night. And she came up to the bar to order a drink because we weren't getting there fast enough. And I said, "Sure, I'll bring it over to you." And when one of the doctors who sits there after his shift phoned while he was at the bathroom, returned to her seat and put it in her purse. I watched it. It was just a mistake because it was the same phone.
Wait a minute.
We lost you for like,
cut out in the middle. Okay.
Go back to the bathroom and the doctor.
Yeah.
Do it again.
The doctor went to the bathroom, and she had taken his phone by accident.
Oh, okay.
And put it in her purse.
Okay.
So I delivered her personally the drink.
Yeah.
And when I got to her table, I said, "Ma'am, I think you put the doctor's phone in your bag." She's like, "Oh, let me check." And she reached down to rifle through her bag, and her false teeth fell out. They tumbled onto the ground, and I figured I'd save her from the embarrassment.
Oh, no.
Grabbed a white linen napkin, and when I went to reach for the teeth, they were already back in her mouth. She had no time to clean.
That is
I never saw that woman again.
Oh,
that is such an uplifting story, Jeff.
Now, Jeff, didn't they have good cinnamon rolls at McGoney's?
They do, and Marjorie, I have the recipe.
You do? Okay, very good cinnamon rolls.
I do.
And did you work there for a long time at the bar at McGoney's?
2 years.
Okay, you may not know my cousin Kevin.
Well, say who your cousins
My cousin
are.
Kevin, he's there. Eli's got red hair.
Do you know Kevin?
I've met a few Kevins with red hair.
I bet you haven't.
Okay. I shouldn't say his last name on the...
Jeff, multi-personality Kevin.
Okay.
Jeff, that was a fabulous story.
Hey, you know about
Thanks.
the new McGoney's with the roof deck. It should be done pretty soon.
I I do. I'll definitely go back. I hope they have some of the same food.
That's right.
We'll see.
Jim makes
I hope
makes
they
fun
don't,
of it.
but okay.
Says
hey,
the
Jeff, thank you.
Tomato sauce comes out of a can. Which
No,
is
I don't
not
say
true.
what that. No, that's, by the way, you are so misrepresenting.
That's what you say.
No, what I've said is when they hand you the can of Chef Boyardee, you get a free Magoni's can opener with it. Then you have a little Bunsen burner. You can heat your dinner. No, by the way, I went to Magoni's once with Marjorie many years ago, and I don't want to. It was spectacular.
It was spectacular.
It was really spectacular.
Kino, had some cinnamon rolls.
Listen, the fact that you almost don't have room on the table for your plate because the Kino machine is so big, that doesn't detract at all from the dining experience.
You never know. You become a millionaire during dinner.
It was just
Benjamin in Providence. Thank you for calling.
Hello, Benjamin. What's up?
Hi, you guys.
Yeah.
The 5-second rule, totally legitimate, but there is a concurrent rule, which is the sudden death rule, which other people have mentioned.
Please.
My dog hair in my house, if I drop it on the dog hair, then it's sudden death.
That's true.
Yeah, dog hair is a problem. I'm with you on that. Anything else that's sudden death?
And, well, yeah, I mean, any kind of stuff that's on the floor. And just to close, Jim, I just had a cheeseburger with mayonnaise. It was wildly delicious.
You did. Well, you're the mayonnaise person, just like Marjorie, and Marjorie appreciates your support on the mayo and cheeseburger issue. Benjamin, thank you for your call. We
Listen to
appreciate
this.
it. Yeah, go ahead.
My first waitressing job, I dropped a tray with 3 expensive steaks. Horrified, I watched the chef wash them off, replace them, and send me back out with this washed off steaks. No lie, customer said, best steak I ever had.
Yeah, but by the way, a grill on my back deck. I have the person who said whatever they said before. I have dropped a piece of steak on the ground, and you put it back on the grill, and I assume that's perfectly fine, right?
But that's the other thing. I waited tables for a long time. This person probably knows this. I mean, the terrible things that the chefs used to do.
You don't know.
They used to smoke cigars in the kitchen where I worked. The sous chef did, and if you didn't like you or mad at you, you did something wrong. He flicked the ashes.
But if you don't know,
on
what's the
food.
difference?
And then you'd kind of scoop things around so the person wouldn't notice there were ashes in their food. I mean, it's terrible what goes on. People have their hands in the ice cream. They have their hands in the butter. I mean, it's, you wouldn't eat at a restaurant if you knew what went on. Well, not all of them, I shouldn't say. Not all of them. Not all of them. Okay. Forget eating off the floor. My toddler spilled his water yesterday and tried to drink it off the floor.
You know how we got my older daughter? I told you this story. This has nothing to do with anything, but since that text, my older daughter, when she was like 2, would not drink milk. Do you know what we did?
What?
We put the milk in a bowl on the floor. Because the cat drank from the milk on the floor, and her name is Mimi. She got on her knees, and she would drink the milk from the bowl on the floor.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And that ultimately got her into the thing.
Good.
Barbara, I'm sorry, you're in a car. I don't mean I'm sorry you're in a car. I'm sorry I took your time. You're in a car. Hi.
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 Hi, this is Barbara Siegel. I know Marjorie.
Hi, Barbara.
How do you know each other?
How do we know each other?
Marjorie has no
idea. I was your kid's pediatrician.
This is unbelievable.
Oh, my kid's pediatrician.
Wait a second. Stop, Barbara. Don't go away.
You're the best pediatrician
ever. A woman calls and says we know each
you.
other. She says her name.
Because I was thinking.
And you have no idea who she is?
Because I was so surprised because I was thinking of the Siegels that live in Brookline, and I'm friendly with a lot of them.
I know who they are.
But Barbara Siegel saved my life when she recognized that my daughter had strep throat.
Oh, you told me that.
And not some horrible other disease. I will always be eternally grateful to you for that, Barbara Siegel.
Barbara, before you get to what you're calling about, what was Marjorie like as the mother of the patient?
Lovely.
Perfectly delightful.
There you go.
Well, obviously.
There you go.
That's
yeah,
not
you
true.
were the best pediatrician ever, Barbara Siegel.
Enough of this.
So what do you think about the 5-second rule?
I think the only exception I would have for it would be like if you dropped a spoonful of peanut butter.
That's Marjorie's favorite food. She's eaten that.
And what would you do?
But I wouldn't eat that.
Oh.
But most anything else I would. Because I agree with Chris, the doc who called earlier, that she, that you ought to respect your immune system.
I find that's amazing.
The other thing I wanted to say was about, there used to be this thing called the Ig Nobel Prize. Have you ever heard of that?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Yeah. I think it was at MIT. Anyway, a few years ago, the study that won was a controlled study of the 5-second rule.
That is great.
No extra illness if you ate something off the floor.
That is fabulous. We're going to check that out.
Now, Barbara Siegel, I want you to know that you diagnosed my daughter's strep throat and said that's what had been wrong with her. And all these highfalutin male doctors at Children's Hospital and Mass General, they said, oh, no, that's not the problem. So you were right, and all these guys were all wrong. And Caroline is a great young woman today.
She is a great young woman. Hey, doctor, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. You embarrassed? You had no idea who she was?
I thought she was one of the Siegels that live near me in Brookline. There are many of them, and I wasn't sure if I knew the sister-in-law or the brother-in-law. There was a Barbara Siegel, not my pediatrician Barbara Siegel.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen Dr. Siegel in years, and
That's incredible.
What a thrill that she called up.
What a story.
Yeah, it is a big story.
No, it's a great story.
I'm very emotional about the whole thing.
No, I know. That thing with your kid was a big
yeah,
thing.
she's the one.
Now, let me just say,
Rescued
one of the things
my daughter.
We are, have close to 100% accurate record of predicting what Jared's response to something is. Jared has the 100th of a second rule. If Jared were ever to drop any food of any kind on the floor, the odds of him eating it are 0%. What would you say, Marjorie?
Jared, I think in your own apartment, if something fell on the floor.
Oh, because it's so clean?
And it was like a nice piece of steak or something, I could see you might take a chance.
Not a chance.
Yeah, the floor is cleaner than the table or the plate. Of course I would just pick it up.
You would eat
it?
There
you go.
Well, if you were at my house for an infamous dinner party that I had once where the lasagna fell out of the pan and onto the floor and I was scooping it back into the pan just as a couple of the guests walked into the kitchen. Whoops.
Well, had I been invited, I would have remembered it, actually. You know what I mean?
That's a great story.
Yeah, I heard it was a great party.
Jim,
you're working your way up to an invitation.
Thank you.
I just like to point out you do not have 100% accuracy anymore.
That's right.
So it's like 98%. It's not that.
Julia Child had that great line from her show.
We just did it. What was the line? If no one saw it, it didn't happen?
Who was going to see?
That's right.
Exactly.
If you're alone in the kitchen, what the hell?
It doesn't matter.
You know what's incredible, this conversation? Am I not right that every person who had some qualifications, as opposed to just irresponsible
Physicians.
people like us, doctors, therapists, everyone said, eat the stuff.
They were with me.
I know they were.
I rest my case.
Yeah.
Rest
By the way, you want to know the truth? I not only ate that sandwich out of the recycling, I ate everything else in the recycling too. It's so gross. I actually did not. I did not.
All right.
Okay,
just
enough of
swipe the line of the recycling so you can get all the extra mustard.
What are you doing? What's on the show there?
So we're going to be talking about the two exciting things coming to Boston, the Michelin star for restaurants or stars. Who knows what they're going to decide now that the Michelin Guide is here. So we'll be talking about
today's
that.
Friday, too.
Could we fail and not get any stars?
Well, since it's pay to play, I doubt it.
Exactly. The pay to play thing upsets me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So we'll talk about all that. And then Waymo is currently in the city mapping out the streets. Do you know what Waymo is?
No.
They're the driverless cars that you can see
I
in
don't want to do that.
Los Angeles and San
Are they
Francisco.
the taxis?
Yeah. Yeah. So
How do you feel about that?
Horrible.
Well, tune in at 2.
Yeah.
And you can hear. I rode one in Los Angeles
You
a few
did?
months ago.
How scary was that?
It wasn't that scary.
Yes, it was.
Well, I'll talk more about the
Okay.
experience. And then we're going to talk about Tom Cruise, 62 years old, still doing his own stunts.
So
nearly
he hangs
passing out.
He hangs from the wings of airplanes.
Of a biplane, yeah.
That is incredible.
I mean, he's going to end up dead at one point. That's what's going
Well,
to happen.
so we all actually pretty much.
Maybe
as far as I
sooner, though,
understand.
because of his stunts.
Okay. All right.
Oh,
well, Jared,
those are great ones.
We'll be looking forward to it.
Okay.
Culture Show, 2 o'clock.
All right.
Yeah, right
Jared
after we're
Bowen.
done, and we're done very soon.
We are.
Yep.
In more ways than one.
Yeah, we're
exactly.
done. Okay. Thank you for people that came down to the Boston Public Library
Thank
to
you
watch
all
the show.
for
We
coming.
very
You're a
much
great
appreciate
audience
that.
today.
And special thanks to the GBH Champion Circle donors for being here today and
Yeah,
for
you were
supporting
great too.
everything
Thank
we
you.
do at GBH. That's what's really great. We really appreciate that too. We also have a podcast. If you haven't gotten enough of us yet, you can check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio as well. On Monday, we're going to be joined for a Monday morning politics panel with Mass Democratic Chair Steve Kerrigan and Mass GOP Chair, Amy Carnevale. Also joining us at Amherst College's Elon Stavins, Boston Globe reporter Kara Baskin, who writes a lot about food and kids, and Princeton's Khalil Gibran Mohammed. We want to thank our crew, Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, our engineer John the Claw Parker, our executive producer Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Patrick Lally, Angelica Marrero, Juan Jose Cadena, our host of the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. As I just said, the Culture Show comes on right after us. I am Marjorie Egan.
I am Jim Browdy.
Yeah, sorry for my bad voice. I hope it'll be better by Monday. Hope you have a great weekend and hope you can tune in again on Monday.
Bye.
Bye.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its 2025-2026 season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Tipping Point author Malcolm Gladwell, Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, and former National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster. BostonSpeakers.org. And M&M Skylights, servicing Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Their team is part of the Velux Skylight Specialist Network and is committed to helping improve the air quality in your home or business. Consultations and more information at mmskylights.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. This is The Culture Show. Coming up today, the Michelin Guide is bringing its stars to Boston.
It is the book, the Bible.
Michelin sends its inspectors to restaurants to eat and award stars. 1, 2, 3.
This is big news for our culinary scene, and it could turn Boston into even more of a dining destination, proving that our restaurants really are in a class all their own, even with our lobster roll and clam chowder mainstays.
You certainly would never lose your temper over something as trivial as the pronunciation of chowder. That's chowder! Chowder!
From there, it's some news out of left field. Baseball superstar Shoeless Joe Jackson was banned from the sport because of the 1919 Black Sox scandal, a major league disappointment to his devoted fans.
Say it ain't so, Joe. Say it ain't so.
Well, it ain't. In a historic decision, Major League Baseball has reinstated Shoeless Joe Jackson and Pete Rose, making them eligible for the Hall of Fame.
Man, I just love this game. Not a plate for food money. It was a game. The sounds, the smells.
Speaking of second chances, the Menendez brothers are one step closer to freedom. Should the Netflix series that dramatized their crimes take credit for renewing public interest in their case?
Part of this process is the two of you reconnecting, growing closer as brothers.
Eric and I killed our parents together, so I'd say that makes us pretty close.
Plus, it's an epic identity crisis for the streaming service formerly known as HBO. There was HBO Go, HBO Now, followed by HBO Max, succeeded by Max, which is now rebranding as HBO Max. At least one thing about this brand has remained completely static. And after countless masks, multiple comrade deaths, car chases, motorcycle chases, helicopter chases, explosions, falls from mountainous heights, superstar and self-sufficient stuntman Tom Cruise completes the Mission Impossible franchise with The Final Reckoning.
I need you to trust me. One last time.
We take on that and more right now in our Arts and Culture Week in Review.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from...
To The Culture Show, live from the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen. Woo! Here with Lisa Simmons.
And Edgar B. Herbeck III.
We're going over the week's top arts and culture headlines, starting with stargazing.
I want a Michelin star. What does it take? How do I scale up the bar? How do we start on a mission, a man on a march? Do we even know who we are?
We are listening to Boston artist Cake Swag's Michelin star because the Michelin Guide is coming to Boston, which means the region could become even more of a dining destination, complete with Michelin-starred restaurants. By the way, rumors have it that the guides travel in pairs and have dinner before 7:30 if you want to have the great, exceptionally great service that they are having.
All right, good to know.
So,
good to know.
I have to say that I have always been really confused. Boston has never had any Michelin-starred restaurants. I guess I started to believe it and think started to be really insecure that we don't have the restaurants. But Edgar has done the reporting on this, and you can tell us why Boston has never had Michelin-starred restaurants and why we're going to now.
Yeah, I mean, it's this is something we on the Curiosity Desk we got a question from one of our viewers, and we looked into this, and it was a revelation to me as well the way that this works. So essentially, Michelin has been around forever in France and in Europe, etc. It is Michelin Tires, the tire people who create
so
the
funny.
guide, which is really funny.
Yeah,
but
it makes sense. It makes total sense.
Once you learn the backstory,
yep.
they were, the whole idea in the beginning was to encourage people to drive to restaurants, therefore using Michelin tires, therefore needing more Michelin tires. It's pretty smart.
Yeah.
But when they first came to the United States in the early 2000s, it seemed like, generally speaking, like they had normally done, they picked kind of big ticket cities. So I think New York was the first to get a guide here in the U.S., which makes sense. Then it seems like they moved to what is called a pay-to-play model as they expanded in the U.S. So essentially what would happen is tourism boards or marketing boards for cities would talk with Michelin and basically pony up some money for Michelin to start a guide in said city or state. So places like Florida and Colorado did this. They ponied up the money. And here in Boston, there was a big article in Eater in 2022 where they sort of started to blow the lid off this. And the people in Boston, Meet Boston, they at that time were basically like, look, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do the pay-to-play thing with Michelin. That changed a little bit over time. When we did our reporting, we talked with Meet Boston about it. And
Martha.
And they basically said, listen, we've learned a little bit more about how the Michelin Guide works. And crucially for them, I think it was that in addition to the star system, there's also this thing called Bib Gourmand, which is rating restaurants that are not quite as expensive, but still giving them a little bit of a nod. And it looks like now Meet Boston has decided to invest some money in this, and Michelin's coming here.
I think it's a good thing. There's also James Beard, right?
Correct.
Absolutely. We've had that for a long time. That is actually, made by, those decisions are made by actual chefs. I mean, I think it's a good thing. I mean, I think that Boston has a lot to offer. I think that it's more and more people are going back out to dinner, more, maybe it's the timing, maybe it's the perfect, opportunity to do this. So, I mean, we'll see what's going to happen. I mean, did you ever see the movie, The 100-Foot Journey with Helen Mirren? Oh my gosh, it's one of these great movies that were made about a Michelin star and about the reason behind why it's so important to have a Michelin star. But if you haven't seen it, you should definitely see it. It's very funny. But yeah, I mean, so now are we going to be seeing this competition? Are we going to be, are people going to be like, I think these people should be Michelin star people? I mean, it's not an easy feat to get a Michelin star.
And we should explain for people who don't know the process. You can get from 1 to 3 stars.
Correct.
We've also heard the travesties that happen when a restaurant loses a star and what that does to somebody's ego and to a restaurant's business. But Edgar, you also talked to some chefs. So here's Nancy Cushman, co-owner of Oyat in Boston, and Rachel Miller, owner of Nightshade Noodle Bar in Lynn, on a recent episode of The Curiosity Desk, discussing the positive impact that this would have on the local food scene.
Boston and Massachusetts probably doesn't get enough credit, as interesting as the food scene has become and developed over the last number of years.
Not having it doesn't exactly attract or retain talent. They're going to Chicago, they're going to Atlanta, Miami, New York. 90 cents to 95 cents of every dollar that goes into a restaurant actually goes right back out the door into the local economy. This makes or breaks careers. Getting a nomination and winning, as far as I have seen, that means that restaurant will survive longer than most restaurants.
And so it seems that there's been this debate back and forth. Do you do the pay-to-play? And we don't necessarily know what the board has paid for Michelin to come to town, but it does seem, from everything I read anyway, I always scope out, what restaurants do you really want to attend if you want to have one nice meal as you're traveling overseas or to another city. But this does seem to up Boston's destination as a tourism site, as a tourism destination, because people will come here simply because there are Michelin star restaurants.
That is definitely something that happens. People travel to
do that,
tick
to
off
say,
Michelin restaurants on their list.
And they do that with Beard. But we also have to understand, too, that the Michelin star is not just about the chef. It's also about a number of other things, right? It's about service. It's about exceptional food. It's about a dining experience. So it's not just the chef that gets involved in this. This is the whole restaurant that needs to be involved. Your staff needs to be right on top of it. Your service needs to be impeccable. So, I mean, it remains to be seen.
I think it is an interesting test case to see what happens, because as you just said, Jared, we heard a couple of local chefs here talking about this. One thing I heard over and over again from chefs when I was doing this was that this is or can be or was a detriment to retaining certain very high-end talent in this area. That chefs really were at a certain point, if this was important in their career, they were going to go to another city, and that could be an issue. There's also, a lot of people will make the case that there will be a knock-on effect here, right? Just by the fact that this is here, people upping their game to do it, is it a rising tide that lifts all boats? So my understanding is I think this is a 3-year kind of agreement. Yep. So I think it's going to be really interesting. We have a start point to look at what happens in the restaurant industry here over the next 3 years and see if there is any change.
And the funny thing is I was reading something online that someone's like, oh, great, now it's going to be harder to get into restaurants. Like, is this going to be harder? Like, now I have to make reservations 6 months in advance. So
and it is hard. Already so many. But I think we're at the point that you can't not have it. So many cities in the U.S. now have it, too, from Texas, Atlanta, Florida. There's, of course, I know those are states. But
and also look at things like The Bear and Emily in Paris, just in the public consciousness right now, where Michelin stars are a big kind of piece of that. So the time is right.
Right.
Well, while the Michelin guides are roaming Boston, kicking the tires on our local restaurant scene, the self-driving car company Waymo is also making its way around the city. So don't be alarmed by the driverless cars, or do be alarmed, depending on how you feel about it. So if people don't know, Waymo, this is a product of Alphabet, Google Alphabet actually, and they have tested this in other markets. It's already in play in Los Angeles and San Francisco, and these are where you have self-driving cars that are essentially taxis. So a few months ago in Los Angeles, I took my first Waymo.
This is fascinating. I want to hear about this.
And it was actually, I was about to say it's a nothing burger, but it's not, because we were, it was two friends and I, we were at the Grove, the shopping center in Los Angeles, and we tried to get the Waymo, and the Waymo couldn't find us. And so then it was like, if somebody was looking down on us, we would have looked completely stupid and absurd, because we kept chasing the Waymo to different locations, because it wasn't like you could contact the driver and the driver would get back to you. Instead, it was being bounced up to a satellite to go to Waymo headquarters or something. So we were running through half of Los Angeles. When we finally got in the Waymo, it was pretty cool, actually. And there was one point that we pulled up next to another Waymo, so we're sitting in the back seat with no driver, and the people next to us are in the back seat with no driver, and it's wild.
It is.
That's crazy. Did you then rev your engines like you were going to race each other?
They should do that, right? Do they talk to each other like that?
Let's go.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're already here, right? They said they're already here in Cambridge and Somerville and
with
East
drivers.
Boston.
Right now, they're in the phase where there are people. They're basically mapping the streets. And I love the idea that like AI can do almost anything right now, but the idea of trying to map the streets of Boston and how you do traffic is going to break AI.
It is. It is going to break. It's totally going to break AI.
But it can't.
And this is the whole thing. What are you going to do when you hit potholes? I mean, I think that people have said some funny things. So someone said, I'm waiting to see them flip off and honk at the person in front when he doesn't move a millisecond when a light changes. Or I wonder how many times they're going to get screwed up getting off at the wrong exit on Storrow Drive.
Yeah.
Or we don't have a graph system, right? There's not
there's no
these
grid.
roads.
Yeah.
There's no grid system. So it'll be very interesting to see Waymo get really frustrated. What are you going to do with the double parkers? What are you going to do? So how do you map that? How do you map they need a real Boston driver behind this Waymo.
This is really a test of how good is AI. Can it figure out how to drive in Boston?
What do you not see a lot of in San Francisco and Los Angeles? Snow.
Yeah.
So how are they going to deal with that? So basically, they've pointed out that these cars are fitted with 29 cameras with 360 degree views, but that also means that if you want to stop a Waymo, all you have to do is step out in front of it. And this has happened in other cities where they're really angry that these self-driving cars are happening.
Just imagine when the Red Sox game is letting
I'm sorry,
out,
but they're going to be stopping every 5 minutes because we have jaywalkers. I mean, whoever crosses at a crosswalk.
But I think this is like it's time for this, right? We've been promised like cars that are going to be able to drive us around, even personal planes that'll be able to drive us around for decades now. The technology's getting closer and closer. I think this is a good thing. And also, I look at this in the context of the Michelin thing, and I think there is something to be said for the fact that, so as Jared was saying, there are a couple of cities that have this, right? This is like part of their expansion. Boston is included in that. We look at the Michelin Guide, which has been in a handful of U.S. cities,
and now we're getting that.
We're getting that. It is not, determined that Boston will be included in the early process of these things. I think that says something about Boston. Like in terms of like size of a city, like the city of Boston. As a city, we punch well above our weight. We're pretty small, right? We're the size of Denver when it comes to population, and yet I think
we're getting some of these things. So you're saying it's not lost that people are looking at Boston as an innovative.
And I think
more,
and that will not always be the case. So I think we should not that I'm saying we should embrace these things, but I think you got to look at this and say like, okay, hey, like this is this is kind of a good thing. It at least says something good about Boston.
Well, I'm a big fan of bikes and public transportation, but in this context, I'm also a fan of Waymo. I enjoyed the experience. It's a smooth experience. I've been in one accident in an Uber, so that's already one up against the Waymo for people who are afraid that if you get in a self-driving car with no other human being in it aside from yourself, that you could be at risk for an accident. Of course, that's going to happen in an Uber or something else, or a taxi or what have you. But this, I have to say, it was a very smooth experience. I think it was a little more expensive than typical.
And they abide by the
cars
rules. I guess they abide by the
taxis.
rules. I guess it's just something we're going to have to embrace.
And like anything else, they've had a couple of instances where they've had accidents, but you have to kind of keep your thinking brain on when you're looking at this stuff. Like regular human drivers also have a fair number of accidents. When they run the numbers, these things are generally quite safe comparative to your average driver,
I'm just hoping that,
let alone your average Massachusetts driver.
I know, but just imagine if Waymo becomes Hal.
Yeah.
And then ferrets us off to a cave somewhere.
Yes, takes over.
Takes you somewhere else.
Who knows? Anything can happen.
Wow. I don't know. Maybe it's time to be
taken
away
you
to
thinking
a cave.
about that.
You did get me. I'm still here for it.
Yeah.
I am embracing technology right now. Let's go. Driverless cars. I want it.
2001 Space Odyssey.
Okay,
anyway.
You can't put the fear in me. Coming up, President Trump goes to bat for Pete Rose and other disgraced baseball players. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
"25 years after the premiere of the hugely popular film Final Destination, the franchise is back for a 6th installment. And the makers of the movie say it's going to be more gory and terrifying than ever.
The death that comes for you in Final Destination is really death by filmmaking.
I'm Elsa Chang. More from the team behind Final Destination Bloodlines on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you. And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, announcing the 2025 season of Tanglewood, showcasing the beauty of incredible surroundings and world-class music. Tanglewood, where music goes for the summer. Tanglewood.org. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com. And Cambridge School of Culinary Arts in Porter Square, offering teen and adult recreational cooking and baking workshops, series, and cooking couples classes for culinary enthusiasts. CambridgeCulinary.com.
From documentaries to in-depth conversations with local leaders, GBH News is your home for trusted local news. Listen on GBH 89.7 or watch on the GBH News YouTube channel.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Edgar B. Hurwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. She's the artistic and executive director of the Roxbury International Film Festival and program manager at Mass Cultural Council. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes a real curveball. Major League Baseball has reinstated disgraced players Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson, among others, making them eligible for the Baseball Hall of Fame. So basically, obviously, both are dead, and this new rule has just suddenly been instituted, or a re-examination of the rules to decide that basically if they've lived out their life, they could still become eligible for the Baseball Hall of Fame. But a lot of people are looking, and I know, Edgar, you have been examining this too, a lot of people are looking at this and thinking that this is the Major League Baseball commissioner who was only recently meeting with President Trump, maybe trying to appease the president.
Yeah, and ESPN reported, no name sources, but multiple sources that said, like, once this decision was made, he called President Trump and let him know in advance of letting the rest of us know. I mean, this is a very, very tricky situation, I think, just in general. I mean, Pete Rose is getting a lot of the headlines here, and it does seem to a certain extent. So it's Pete Rose, who I think people know was, received a permanent ban from baseball.
For gambling on his own team.
Specifically for gambling.
His own team, right.
And, baseball and the culture of baseball forever, the idea that gambling is the is the unpardonable sin, goes back all the way to Shoeless Joe and the 1919, what were known as Black Sox, who threw the World Series. Now, there are people, certainly if folks saw Field of Dreams, we know that Shoeless Joe, to a certain extent, has undergone a certain rehabilitation. And there are those who say there's nothing that indicates, even though Shoeless Joe maybe took a little money and his teammates certainly helped throw the series, he performed quite well. So he's not he's not seen as the nefarious figure that Pete Rose is. But it does seem like even though Shoeless Joe and 14 others are included in this really was about Pete Rose specifically.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, and everyone, and it's because he's in our most recent memory, right? And you're right. The whole thing about Field of Dreams sort of like made Shoeless Joe this sort of like, like this character, who had been wronged, and who doesn't love that movie. But, I know there is a lot of controversy. I mean, I think it's really interesting that Giamatti, who was the commissioner at this point in time.
Paul Giamatti's
dad. I know, isn't that great? Paul Giamatti's dad, if people didn't know.
Guy, born in Boston, I think.
Born in Boston, Yale guy. He was a baseball, fanatic and a lecturer and a professor on baseball. I think this was really hard for him during this time when this happened, because it was sort of like, this is Pete Rose. I mean, this is a guy who hit like 4,250 some odd,
more hits than anybody else
in the history of the game. And so I think, but when you look back at it, it is hard. Like, what do you do? I mean, here this guy's a gambler. He cheated on his wives. He had affairs. He deserved his banishment. He took down the national sport, right?
And he was unapologetic in his lifetime about it. And that seems to have been his cardinal sin to a certain extent.
Right. I mean, I think finally he ponied up and said, yes, like, I did this, and and I think his family's been waiting for this. But it is true. Donald Trump had already said this before.
He said he was going to
pardon Pete Rose when he became president.
To some extent, I think this comes down to the debate we often have about actors or singers who have been convicted for crimes. And can you listen to their music? Can you go and watch their movies after you know they've been convicted of these crimes? Well, we know that Pete Rose did this, but does that have to, because without these, of course, I think everybody would argue that there's no question he would go into the Hall of Fame. But for the fact that he lied, but for the fact that he was also accused of statutory rape. There were allegations that came, never convicted, but there were allegations. But for the fact that we know he bet against his own team as a manager, he's not in the Hall of Fame. And it's interesting to see this has come down at a pretty even divide. People saying, you know what, there are lots of people with a lot of moral sins.
So many.
And
that's
what
they talk about.
And people who
can you
are
imagine
racist,
what those plaques are going to read? That,
right.
People
there's
who
are
many
racist
people
in the Hall of Fame already. So
and
why not just let the man in?
I
think you hit on the main thing here, though, Jared, right? Because what we see now is when we're trying these people in the court of public opinion to a certain extent, right? We're all over the map. As you point out, there are already really awful people,
that
like
are already
awful humans in the Hall of Fame. You have the steroid era, and some people have gotten in and some people haven't. It's a very uneven meting out of justice. And I think the best argument for this, generally speaking, I grew up a Phillies fan and a Pete Rose fan. I have come to realize it's really disappointing what he was like as a human. That said, I think I am not in favor generally, to your point, Jared, of bans. And as people have pointed out, this is called the Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. And so to a certain extent, you do ask yourself, like, what is the role of a museum to put context around these things, to say, here's the complicated story behind these people, behind baseball, behind what it is. Is that a place to mythologize baseball, or should that be a place to really look at baseball?
Well, and also because you're talking about
culture?
A national pastime, right? Baseball is the American sport, right? And so that's why I think this carries so much more weight in terms of, like, you're supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to be, the perfect father, the perfect husband, in addition to that, being like the best baseball player. Like you have to be all in the same, right? But that's not the case. They're not all great people, but they're great baseball players, or they're great actors, or whatever they are. So where does the fame? So should you be kicked out of that because you were subjectively saying, like, we don't like what you're doing in the world? I don't know. You're right. There's this huge conversation, and it will be. He doesn't get to be until 2028, so there's still a lot more time to have this conversation.
Which is
about
more time for people to kind of forget the behavior. But I think it also raises the question about where you are in terms of your behavior and what you do to the sport. So that's something that needs to be analyzed too. And at some point, you do have to have standards about the quality. But Edgar, I haven't seen anybody say what you just said about also contextual contextualizing it and making people understand the character who's in the Hall of Fame, should he go there. Well, this is kind of a whole segment where we're looking at how the past isn't forever. And speaking of second chances, the Menendez brothers, who have spent more than 3 decades in prison for fatally shooting their parents, were resentenced earlier this week, a move that puts them on a potential path to freedom. The reason we're talking about this is because there have been a slew of media stories about the Menendez brothers. There have been people on TikTok making videos. There have been 2 Netflix films. One is a feature film and one is a documentary. And I think if we consider all of this in its totality, it has gotten people to look back at this event from 1989 and the criminal justice system of 1989 in a vastly different way. This is a piece from the trailer of the 2024 Netflix documentary, The Menendez Brothers.
Now there's the TikTok movement to free the Menendez.
There's a new generation that support the brothers.
People are looking at the case with fresh eyes.
2 kids don't commit this crime for money. And there's people that believe I shouldn't spend the rest of my life in prison.
That judge was determined he was going to get a conviction.
These kids went through some horrible things. I'm telling you now, it's all fake. And if you don't know it's fake, that pisses me off.
There is no evidence saying they're not guilty.
So as audiences have seen this, I think there is no question that this is what has driven this re-examination of the Menendez brothers, who now will have the chance of parole, that's yet to be decided, and or clemency granted by California Governor Gavin Newsom.
I think it's that, but I also think it's the Kardashian.
Oh, go on.
Okay, so Kim Kardashian has been talking a lot about this. She's been very much involved in this whole Menendez thing. Like remember when she went to the White House to talk to Donald Trump about commuting Marie Johnson, and then it happened, right? Well, she's also been very much, she was part of that Netflix film. She has been talking to the Menendez brothers. So she's been very instrumental in sort of like pushing this idea that they should be, which I think is really interesting. Pop culture meets crime. I don't know.
The criminal justice
system. And she was studying to be a lawyer. So
Okay.
See, So anyway, so here we have, this pop culture, you're right, coming in and saying, looking at this again and saying, well, it wasn't their fault. They were abused. Like, this is all, we know that this happened and they should be granted another trial. They should never have been put away without parole. And so I think that all of that feeds this conversation about whether or not they should be paroled, and it's going to happen. I mean, they already have a date set in early June to get resentenced.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things that this is incredibly tricky if you look at it. So, like, the idea. I look at it's hard to look at this because I think generally speaking, I'm probably in very few cases in favor of the idea of you lock somebody away for life with no chance of
especially
parole,
at a young
whatever,
age,
right?
especially at 18 and 21.
Even for an outrageous crime like this was, right? There's obviously sort of more context to this than they just kind of felt like shooting their parents, right? Wherever you come down with this. But it's also, I mean, I think it's interesting because you got to kind of ask yourself, what is the job of like the media and what is the job of the criminal justice system? And they are kind of 2 different things. So on the one hand, I'm kind of okay with the fact that they feed each other. Like when you think about the criminal justice system, right? It's kind of like if you're the prosecution, your job is to go in there and sell just one side of the story, right? You have determined these are the guys. It's not about context. It's not about subtlety. It's about here's why we're sure they're guilty. If you're a defense attorney, your job is to present them completely in the other light, right? And then, you both make your case to the jury with one side each. Yep. And so, like, that context, that subtlety, that the criminal justice system isn't the place to adjudicate that, but pop culture or documentary filmmaking is.
Because this is also taking the measure of society, because this is reacquainting us with the fact that but the argument for the Menendez brothers is we shot our parents and killed them because we were being sexually abused and molested. And this was not admitted basically in the second trial.
Exactly.
So, but we're in a very different space 30, 40 years later as we think about these things.
And the first trial was a hung jury.
The first trial was a hung jury, and again, in the second trial, this wasn't allowed to be admitted. So we're in a very different place in society. We're also not in the lock them up and throw away the key element of society anymore either. There's much more consideration of rehabilitation and really considering the circumstances. And I think that whether it be Kim Kardashian or Ryan Murphy producing for Netflix, that has changed the tenor of this conversation and moved the society forward or had the society meet up to where thought is at this point.
But I think that's really interesting that you say that like society is meeting its moment right now, because it's true. You've had the Me Too movement. You have people talking about sexual abuse and abuse in a way that they no one was ever talking about that during this time.
Absolutely.
And people understanding that there was, like you said, Edgar, like this didn't just happen on a whim. You just didn't walk in and kill, like something was happening to these kids during this.
Complicated situation.
It's very complicated.
That said, you look at this and you wonder about any number of dozens or hundreds or thousands of people in similar situations who were not celebrities, whose trial was not, kind of televised, who have not had Netflix series about them, who are in the exact same situation and will not get any kind of justice.
Right.
If it is indeed you think this is justice being served.
Right.
Well, speaking of these transitions, we have one more.
Oh.
Well, infamously, the Central Park jogger case and the subsequent trial was also reevaluated with time, and now Detroit Opera is staging the Pulitzer Prize-winning opera Central Park 5, which we're listening to right now. It's about the young black and Latino men wrongly convicted of rape. It was a racially charged spectacle when, in the late 1980s, Donald Trump fanned the flames by taking out a full-page newspaper ad calling for the men to be executed. So there's a lot of attention being paid right now to this opera being staged. We know, of course, how this has turned, and these men were exonerated. They're now, instead of the Central Park 5, called the Exonerated 5. Their stories have been told. Their stories have been shared. Detroit Opera and other companies have been planning this cycle of this particular opera for a couple of years, but a lot of people are making note of the timing in which it's being presented because Donald Trump as a character is portrayed in this opera.
I want to see it. My big takeaway is there was a rave review of this in the Detroit Free Press. I mean, and it as you point out, Jared, it won the Pulitzer. It's been staged a number of times, kind of here and there. Right now, it's in Detroit. I mean, this seems like, just at very baseline, just an incredible work of art.
I mean, I think it's incredible to take a story like this that was so heart-wrenching when it happened, and that it was just so blown up, and you had this figure, this real estate mogul, and Donald Trump, who really believed so wholeheartedly that that these boys at the time did this and took out this ad. It's just, using again public media to sort of convince or to move the public opinion on something, and then to find out years later that they never did this in DNA and they were exonerated. But to take art like opera and create an opportunity to see this in another way, to me, is beautiful. And this particular Mr. Davis, who is the composer, has done a number of operas, but one of them was also The Life and Times of Malcolm X. So I like this way of taking these stories of people that you may have read about or in some other way and turning that into an artistic piece that will resonate with people in a way that maybe if they hadn't seen the written word wouldn't have seen it.
Well, and this is what theater does so well. When you're in the room with another figure, even though it might not be the actual figures, but the living, breathing embodiment of those figures as portrayed by singers or actors on stage, you see and absorb this story on an entirely different level. And this is also more resonant right now because recently a judge rejected an attempt by the president to reject a defamation suit because they sued him based on remarks he made during the last September's debate with Kamala Harris. And so that's moving forward as well. So of course this is the past meeting the present because this story continues to unfold.
And also, I mean, it's just that, that there's that thing of, I mean, you think about when this happened, and it was one of many, many sort of big stories at the time, but these headlines that kind of fly by in real time, and then, this getting breathed life into it in a different way decades later, where the context is all different too. I mean, there's a world where Donald Trump never becomes president. Maybe he's still a very big figure in New York, or maybe he becomes a failed businessman, and this is a different kind of story. But this, this moment sort of crystallized in time is also breathed new life by the context we're in today and what happened in all of these people's lives as we've gone on decades
30 some
on.
odd years later. Yeah, and I think it's really important, and I love the way that they talk about like this opera opens again amid the space that we're in, where arts and culture is being slashed and wrongful convictions are so still common. It's sort of like, you know, how do we reconcile this, right?
And this is not intentional. This opera, because people always need to be reminded of this. This was planned 2 years ago because it takes that long to stage things.
Right.
So they had no idea what they were walking into in staging this in May of 2025.
Well, it's the reminder when you go after universal themes, they will always resonate in the times.
I'm waiting for the cease and desist, because apparently the look of Donald Trump in this opera is not a good one.
Well, also they got NEA money to do a little bit of NEA money. In the context, $40,000 is not a little bit of money, but in this context, to fund this, they get $40,000 from the NEA. So that's partly how this was staged.
And it is interesting, though, like as you said, that it wasn't in there in the first part. They put Donald Trump in the second part because they felt like it was really important in this particular iteration. And like you said, Edgar, the iterations go on and on. Like we're constantly bringing things forward.
Well, and looking at the past will lighten things up a little bit, because the streaming network formerly known as HBO is having an identity crisis.
Again.
Remember when it was HBO Go, then HBO Now, followed by HBO Max, succeeded by Max, which is now, in its latest rebrand, flipping its name back to HBO Max. I have to say, even as the host of the Culture Show, I had no idea what they were anymore. We featured a couple of people from HBO series on the show in the last few months, and I just kept calling it HBO Max because I had no idea, and I didn't really believe there was anything other than HBO.
I don't know what they're doing. I mean,
rebranding.
No, I understand that, but this is HBO is such a strong brand.
Exactly.
It is for decades been a very strong brand doing something very specific. It's you could make the argument like single-handedly like ushered in this golden age of prestige television. Everybody knows that. Everybody associates that with HBO. And why they have like continued to try to like iterate or bring things into, I don't know what they're doing.
Well, because this isn't, it's not HBO anymore, right? Here we have Warner Brothers and Discovery saying, well, we can't call it HBO because we have all this other content for young people, and HBO means like adult content or whatever. Of course, which nobody knows. And so, I mean, I've always been calling it HBO, but I mean, it is interesting. I mean, they were making fun of themselves by changing it over. I mean, they just changed it like in 2023 or something like that, and then they're like, well, that's not working because Max didn't mean anything to anybody. And so one of the things they do talk about is branding is so important, right? It's like, especially if you have a brand. No, it is. When you think about, it does. Because you took away HBO from Max, and people were like, what is that? Now you put it back and it's like, oh, HBO Max. Like, it does mean it. You don't mess with that. And I think that's what people are saying. Like, don't mess with these. There are other brands that did that. Gap changed their logo and people were like, what is that? And public opinion was like, what are you doing? Tropicana said, oh, we're going to change our cover and we're going to have it be more minimalist, and people couldn't find it on the shelves, so they started buying something else. So it matters that you go back to the thing that everybody like grabs onto.
I think that was totally known before they went to Max. Like, it's just, I was mystified when they met. Like, why would you go to Max in the first place? Like, I know that branding is important.
I thought Max was Cinemax.
Well, it was. I mean, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought it was like a nod to Cinemax.
I know.
But then also
were
it's
they
like,
owned by the same people? Look how
they
close
were.
we are.
Yes, they were. But this is the point. You've got HBO and you've got Cinemax, and like which is the one you're gonna throw your money behind?
They couldn't call it Cinebo because that would be too much like Cinnabon. We say this to you as we're coming from GBH.
I don't know.
We have to acknowledge our own. We'll acknowledge what we did here.
This feels like a group of people who were in a series of meetings who all were in those meetings for too long and completely lost sight of the ball.
Or somebody came in, some new person came in and said, I have an idea. Why don't we call it HBO Max? And someone said, oh my God,
like, that's
Max.
What about Just
That's a great
Max?
idea. I mean,
it's like a Coen Brothers movie.
Would be,
it's like a board meeting in a Coen Brothers movie. What about Just Max?
Just Max.
Well, we'll give people a chance to mow on all of this. So coming up, no more Undressed to Impress at the Cannes Film Festival. Event officials say you can come, but you can't be naked. That and more is next on our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Stay with us.
France.
Eurovision Song Contest is known for campy spectacle and global bragging rights.
Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of the Eurovision Song Contest 1968 is Spain.
But it's also been the scene of political intrigue and sabotage. Spain's Eurovision history next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Omni Boston Hotel at the Seaport, offering a range of experiences including a variety of accommodations, weekly jazz nights, a 24-hour art gallery, and more. Reservation information available at omnibostonhotel.com. And Boston Ballet, presenting Spring Experience, a program that showcases the range and beauty of ballet today, featuring works by Mikko Niisanen and Jiri Killian, now through May 25th at Citizens Opera House. Tickets at bostonballet.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked #1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
If you're looking for a break from the non-stop headlines, check out the Joy Beat podcast. Every episode, we step back and celebrate the heartwarming stories and inspiring people in our communities. Find the Joy Beat wherever you listen to your podcasts.
I'm Jared Bowen. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. I'm joined by co-host Edgar B. Horwick III and Culture Show contributor Lisa Simmons. We're coming to you live from our studio at the Boston Public Library. We're going over the latest headlines, which includes a sign of the times, we think. A slumping economy has people tightening their belts, but not on their Burberry trench coats. The luxury brand is slashing jobs. Meanwhile, at the famed Sotheby's auction house in New York, it's going, staying. The sale of an estimated $70 million Giacometti bust is exactly that, a bust, after failing to attract a bidder. So these are kind of separate stories, but it does seem to be marking a trend, at least in the luxury market. So let's start with fashion for a moment, because we see that this is happening at Burberry, where I think sales are down about 17%.
17%, yep.
They've had to lay off 1,700 people.
117.
Yeah. 1,700 people. What did I say, 17 people?
And 117% fall in profits.
Yeah. So this
it's not good. Things are not good.
Things are not good at Burberry.
This is also the same for some of the other brands like
Louis
Dior
Vuitton.
and
Yes.
Louis Vuitton and their ownership. And so there's this moment where in the luxury brand we're seeing all of this shuffling among creative directors, because they're doing everything they can to try to revamp these brands. But you wonder what's happening here if people have decided they're not spending this money on these luxury items that used to be very prestige and aspirational for a lot of people.
Burberry Max. That's
Burberry.
the answer. They should go with
Burberry.
HBO Burberry Max.
You know, I mean, I think
instead it's Burberry Go.
But it's also, I think we're at that point where we're meeting the moment, right? Maybe that's the thing, right? If you have the younger generation that is very, and maybe this is a campaign and a social media campaign about throwaway clothes and about people going back to doing consignment shopping and stuff like that, and people saying, different brands now mean different things, and Burberry means sort of like stodgy and non-trendy and sort of like that's the classic, and maybe that's where Burberry needs to sit instead of trying to be something that they actually really are not and creating Burberry bikinis or whatever. But I do think that there is this thing, and maybe it's a global phenomenon where you're right, luxury brands are sort of like not the thing anymore, and people are moving to not spend that kind of money, like $1,000 or $2,000 or $3,000 on a bag or a trench coat.
Well, I think it's a couple things, right? So there's certainly, I mean, I'm not an economic forecaster, but there's obviously like economics play a part in this, right? In terms of like it sounds like even the quite wealthy are doing a little belt tightening, right? So there's that. But then there's the other piece you're talking about, which is luxury brands. I mean, that they are aspirational in nature, right? The idea is like, you somehow embody or encapsulate something that people want to aspire to. And of course, generationally, as we change, what people aspire to be changes. And like, these brands that have been able to stay around for a long time in these luxury spaces find a way to bob and weave and change to continue to be what people aspire to. So I think we're just in a period we're going to see which one of these emerge as something that people still look at it and say, yeah, That's where I'm trying to get to.
And so, as I mentioned in the introduction, as that's happening, we know what the high-stakes art world auction houses are like. Maybe not from being there, but we certainly have watched enough movies to know what they're like.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Sotheby's removed this Giacometti bust that we talked about. It didn't sell. And interestingly, Sotheby's removed the Giacometti segment from the replay posted to their official YouTube
they took
channel.
it out?
But a French journalist filmed it. Here's auctioneer Oliver Barker pleading with the audience to bid.
64 million for the Giacometti now. $64 million. $64 million.
Anybody?
See that? $64 million. 64 million. You bet it's 64.
Okay, let's put Oliver out of his auctioneering misery right now.
What was that? 20 minutes, 64. Anybody for 65?
There is an incredible
65.
line in the New York Times in a New York Times piece describing this. It says 3 minutes passed as he hunched low over the rostrum, hunting for bidders, Nosferatu-like, until announcing that the lot will pass.
I love when they also reported when they said there were gasps in the audience.
Yeah,
that
because
people were like,
I mean, we have come through basically a whole generation now where this art goes for major money. We've talked about these record sales. Giacometti is the sculptures anyway of this Italian sculptor, long dead Italian sculpture, go for a lot of money, tens of millions of dollars, if not more, at auction houses. So this shocked everybody when it didn't meet the $70 million threshold.
But it sounds like there's at least some, so like there's some people who are looking at this and like kind of tying it together with what you're saying, Jared, about what's going on with luxury brands, and it's telling us something.
Belts.
There are others who say that maybe that the sellers here
are to be blamed.
That they were punching a little bit above their weight. With this one in particular, I guess there was a similar bust or a version of this bust of which there were a number. This one's the only painted one, but that one didn't go for more than 50-something million a couple years ago, and so they were like, yeah, if you really thought it was going to get to 70, maybe it wasn't really ever going to get there, and maybe this is the market just kind of calling BS on something that was a little overpriced.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's true because last week also at Calder, O'Keeffe, and Picasso sold.
Yes.
But they had to pull a Warhol from the Christie's auction because they knew that wasn't going to
the electric chair, which is pretty amazing. But I mean, I think part of that is too, and I do think it is on the sellers in a way because they didn't get this guarantee, and the guarantee that basically says if it doesn't sell at a certain price, then somebody else will buy it, right? And so I think that they just believed that it was going to go to like 100 million. They were basing their whole auction on this particular piece, and I think that's what was devastating for them. I mean, they said they call it a crushing blow to Sotheby's. I'm sure I can't even imagine what's happening in the back rooms, and people are talking about like who made this mistake, but it does make you think about like what's happening with private sales. Are there going to be more private sales in the back rooms instead of bringing them forth without this guarantee that someone is going to buy it?
I mean, also again, I'm not in these auction houses, so I can't see that this is such a huge deal. But it did get to 63 point whatever
million. But it didn't get to what it was supposed to.
No, I understand that's the reserve, but it is like it's not like nobody would give you $20 for it.
I know.
Like it got
all right,
to
I'll kick in the other 10 million.
They just couldn't quite get there.
Well, for whatever reason it happened, people are certainly paying attention because the art market has been dipping a little bit.
It has been.
Well, let's move to Europe now, where the naked dress gets a dressing down at the Cannes Film Festival, now underway in France. Nudity on the red carpet has been banned. So the Cannes Film Festival.
What is happening to France?
It's decency. They're bringing back decency.
What is going on in France?
They're bringing back decency.
This is your world, the film world.
It is.
So, of course, the Cannes Film Festival is where you have all the celebrities arriving. This is where the big premieres happen, and it's where you
arrive. It's even more than the Academy Awards. It's France, like you said. It's France. Anything goes. Really,
except for nudity.
Except for nudity. France is buttoning up. Like, what is going on in the world?
So this is interesting, because they have issued this new, or they actually said they're clarifying the dress protocols.
Yeah, they say it's not new
for the red carpet, and that you cannot have a naked dress because we have seen. And in fact, if you're watching here at the library, or if you're watching at home on our GBH News YouTube channel, you'll see a couple of examples of dresses that have been worn on the red carpet at Cannes recently by model Bella Hadid, for example, where they're
Yeah.
It's a naked dress.
It's a naked dress.
It's a nice dress.
Yeah, and I mean they also banned having long trains because it was getting in the way of people.
Not just long
tripping.
trains, quote voluminous outfits.
Voluminous outfits. But there were people that bucked the system. So Halle Berry shows up in a voluminous dress.
She had to pivot.
And
Pivot.
yes, you had to pivot a little bit. I mean, I think this may be coming from when Kanye they showed up at the Grammys like naked. I mean, there needs to be some form of decency put in.
She had
so
a
that
sheer dress. Which showed everything.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, I feel like, I understand what they're trying to do. I do also understand the criticisms that people are making, saying this is mostly against women because women have the option. You're taking away their freedom, the sense of wanting to explore their sexuality or their artistry, and you're taking away the designers who are creating this, and they get the most look, right? If you show up on the red carpet with this incredibly revealing dress, you're going to get more looks than you are if you're going to wear some sort of like buttoned up thing. So they are sort of saying like, why us? Like men don't have to do this. Like, no, but they're not showing up.
I mean, so this is the same place, right? There was like this 5-year drama about high heels that they went through a couple years ago, right? And it was like women were campaigning about whether they should have them or not, and some people were taking them
because
off
they were being told they had to wear them.
Yeah,
they had to wear them, and they were not allowed on the carpet,
including
if they didn't
like people
have
who
them.
had like broken their foot and they're in a flat and they're like, sorry, can't do it. But to a certain extent, I feel like this ties in a little bit with what we were talking about, the luxury brand thing, right? Because part of the idea here, right, is that there is a certain propriety or decorum that you maintain in a place like this.
Yes,
and,
yes.
In the old days, there would have been a time where if you were in the rarefied air of being there, you would know what the rules are and you would follow the rules, right? It's like whites at Wimbledon or whatever, right?
And I think that people are pushing the envelope.
They are, because I think we're in a time where we are re-adjudicating what it is to be in the upper crust or what is tasteful or,
you also have to remember, society goes through these moments that look at the 1920s and the flappers, and suddenly you're coming out of the Victorian age and you were suddenly showing skin. So here's what I keep wondering about, because we've seen women wearing the naked dress. Cher did it in the Met Gala in the 1970s. This has been going on for a long time. Who have we not seen wearing nude clothing?
Who?
Men.
Oh, yes. Well, that's what I was saying.
I think that's the next thing.
It's going to be the next thing.
That'll be interesting to watch.
Everyone's just going to keep pushing back and saying, like, if
clear
they
spandex.
Oh my gosh! I don't even. Oh my God! Please.
Okay, we don't need to think about that.
I don't know.
I don't.
All right, that was supposed to be the Mission Impossible theme, but like our sister and brother Jim and Marjorie, we've been having some clearance rights issues.
I was like, am I on the wrong page?
So we're listening to Mission Improbable.
Mission I like it. Kind of.
No.
I like it?
We hate it. We can stop.
But
we're actually going to stay at Cannes right now, because lingering on the red carpet at Cannes, superstar Tom Cruise said adieu to Mission Impossible with the premiere of the last reportedly film in the franchise of Film Reckoning. And I thought this was fascinating to see Tom Cruise do his Tom Cruise thing at the Cannes Film Festival, because this guy knows how to make action movies, and he really knows how to be a movie star.
Oh, he knows. He is. I mean, he's had years and years to do it, but he is the quintessential movie star. He knows to say the right things. He knows what he needs to do. He bops in, he bops out. I'm sorry, I love Tom Cruise movies. I love Mission Impossible. I love Night and Day when it was filmed here. I just that adrenaline. They're fun. They're really fun. But the fact that at 62 he's still doing his own stunts, and that's what this was really about too. Is like, here he is on a biplane, like pushing the envelope of what he needs.
That story is insane.
Insane.
No. That is insane.
But it's beyond insane.
Well, you have to tell people what it is if they haven't heard.
Right.
So as the director tells it, they're doing this stunt. He at 62 still says he's going to do. He insists on doing his own stunts. This is on a biplane, and like the way he tells the story is like, so the human body can only take 12 minutes when they're walking on the wing of a biplane due to the like air pressure and stuff like that. He gets to the 12-minute mark, and the director's like, we've got to go down, and of course
because there's no gas.
Tom Cruise
there's
is
no
like,
gas in
no,
the plane.
not yet. Tom Cruise is like, I'm still good. I can keep going. Then he like goes down.
God.
They're like, maybe he's passed out, and the pilot's like, we only have 3 minutes of gas left. And then out of nowhere, Tom Cruise arises, climbs his way back to the cockpit to breathe fresh air.
He's like,
and then crawls in and they land just in time. That
my gosh. And
crazy town.
I love the fact that they said, too, that 12 minutes is like 2 months in the gym or
Yeah,
something like
he's
that.
like, only 12 minutes?
The fact that he got a 5-minute standing ovation at Cannes, not because of the movie, but because he basically showed up alive on the red carpet.
Well, yeah, and because
after
he's
doing this. But what is who's carrying the insurance on Tom Cruise?
I mean, I hear you on that.
Honestly, I mean, this is amazing. But it does marvel, and that's why he is the movie star. That's why his Mission Impossible series. I mean, actually, Top Gun did better than Mission Impossible, the last one, which is crazy to me. But which is why he never ages in a sense.
And apparently
well,
he's half naked in a lot of this film. And at 62 years old,
he did show up with clothes on, though,
which is great. But I'm with you, Lisa. I am just, for some reason, and you can leave again. We'll go back to the other discussion. There are some things that he does that I just am bewildered by.
Yeah.
But as a movie star and as an actor, you know exactly what you're getting, and he always delivers. And they're entertaining, even though they're kind of insane. In fact, I think the New York Times, in their review of the latest Mission Impossible film, called it enjoyably unhinged.
Yeah.
So you know what you're getting. You know what you're getting with him. You know what you're getting with the film. If you decide to believe those stories about 12 minutes on a biplane wing or not.
Oh my God! And I can't imagine McQuarrie, the director, thinking, "Oh my God, did I just kill Tom Cruise?"
Totally.
That is not going to go over well. I'm never going to get another picture.
But you're right. He is the quintessential movie star, and in a way, like, he has continued. He has sort of like stayed doing his thing while the industry around him has kind of collapsed and fallen apart, and he still has his high standards, and he walks that line of sometimes he'll do a little arty thing, then he'll do a big crowd pleaser thing, and like, he has stood the test of time. And as you say, Jared, like, I have a movie friend who I go to a lot of movies with, and he's like, name a bad Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah.
Like, tell me a Tom Cruise movie you don't actually like. He's right.
And he refuses to do streaming too. Which is why he's credited with saving Hollywood. Well, that lightning sound means it's our thunder sound. I always do that. Lightning. You can't hear lightning, Jared.
Of lightning.
No, I don't think you can.
Okay.
Anyway, that means it's time for our lightning round. These are the headlines that caught our attention this week. Lisa, what's yours?
Mine is Ava DuVernay. Many people know she just received the Smithsonian's Great Americans Medal. Now, she's the first director and writer-producer to earn this honor. It's a lifetime contribution that embodies American ideals. And ideas. And I think this is very important. We know she did Selma. She started out as an actual film publicist and then became a film director with her own independent films, Middle of Nowhere and a number of those. But then she went on to create some of the 13th, which is really, she uses film as a catalyst for conversation, which we talk a lot about at Rock's Film, and using film to do that. So, I mean, I think that this is a really great honor. She is inspirational in her work. And she says, it's not lost on me what it means to stand in this place supported by an institution that understands the weight of history and the wonder of telling it well. We are in that moment. Again, we were talking about stories, about things, and meeting the moment, and I think she is meeting that moment, and she has met that moment to unearth these stories. And so we say congratulations to her.
That's awesome.
It is. Edgar?
So mine is the Museum Bowl. So you might remember back in February, the Philadelphia Eagles football team played the Kansas City football team.
I remember that.
And the Eagles won.
Big time.
The museums, 2 museums in these towns had a bet going, and the bet has been made good this week. So Edward Manet's The Croquet Party, which belongs to the Nelson Atkins Museum in Kansas City.
Free, always free.
Is now on view at the Philadelphia Museum of Art through August 17th, and this is them paying off the bet, which was if the Philadelphia Eagles beat the Kansas City Chiefs, they would gift this painting for a period of time for people to see it at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. This is now 2 years ago or 3 years ago when they also played in the Super Bowl, they did a similar bet. And the Philadelphia Museum of Art settled up with the Thomas Akins painting, Sailing, which went to the Nelson Atkins in Kansas City, and they were good enough then to throw in an Akins sketch for a painting which was also in this Kansas City Museum's collection. So the fact that these two museums are kind of doing this,
sports and museums,
yes,
I love this connection.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
So
really fun.
I'm going to skip ahead to mine. By the way, I want to clarify. Tom Cruise does believe in streaming, but just not when the film's coming out. But
he
anyway,
believes it exists.
Have you both been to Disney World or Disneyland?
No,
Yes.
I've been to neither, actually.
Oh.
Yeah.
Lisa, when you went to Disneyland, did you go on uranium hunt?
No.
Yeah, so
What is-
this is what I love. There's a new book that's come out. It's called The Happiest Place on Earth, and it tells the origin story, basically, of Disneyland. It's written by an animator and a parks designer, and they talk about some of the failed designs, like uranium hunt, where they would hand kids a Geiger counter, and there would be real radioactive uranium in the rocks,
Not
and then they
real.
would give them souvenir uranium to take home.
What? No,
And a little shot of mercury on your way, kid.
So that's all in the new book, The
Get all the
Happiest
stuff that's
Place
bad
on
for
Earth.
you.
That is fantastic.
Yeah,
Oh,
so no
God.
more uranium hunt. Well, that's all for this edition of The Culture Show. You can tune in Monday as the Boston Public Art Triennial gets underway. We speak with artistic director Pedro Alonso and participating artist Laura Lima. Also here are retired astronaut Katie Coleman and her husband Josh Simpson, a renowned glass artist whose work will blow you away. Thanks today to the BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, Pat Lally, and Olivia Corshio. Also thanks to the Lennox Hotel, the Newsfeed Cafe. Thank you to everyone who came down to the library today. We love to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jared Bowen. If your mission, if you choose to accept it, is to have an art
Nice.
is
No,
to
that
have
was
an
good.
art-filled weekend. Thank you.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
Tchaikovsky's Italian Capriccio